Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to call to order the January 23rd, 2019 Select Board meeting to order. There's no changes to the agenda that I'm aware of. Announcements?
Just the one announcement that this meeting is being video and audio recorded.
Any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Phil?
Phil Gallagher. I would appreciate it if you folks would find some additional ways to help the Coast Guard folks and the TSA people as well, but in particular the Coast Guard folks, because some of us know what it's like to be a low-ranking enlisted man and trying to make it financially. So if you've got any brainstorming, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Any other comments tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay, see none. There's no new business that I'm aware of. Is there approval of minutes, approval of payroll warrants, and approval of treasury warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Approval of pending contracts. Libby, do you have anything?
I don't.
Okay. Board?
Motion for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Citizen Department request. Our first one is Capital Program Committee. Mr. Stephen Welch is going to walk us through this. Thank you, Stephen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Stephen Welch. I serve as the Capital Program Committee Chair, and we're here tonight presenting our FY20 report, a copy of which you received in your packets last week. Thank you for having us. Out of respect for your time this evening, I'll provide a brief executive summary and recap the report's contents. The executive summary is that CAPCOM received 87 funding requests for fiscal year 20. Those requests totaled over $101 million. After a comprehensive examination and evaluation, we are prepared to recommend capital outlays for 75 requests totaling $98 million. Page 2. So insofar as the report itself, for easy reading without sacrificing needed information, we provided summary pages and appendices as a backup. So I'll touch on these now. On page 2, the general fund and enterprise account recommendations are summarized by department and sub-accounts. Our recommendation is to allocate $36 million to the general fund and $62 million to enterprise accounts. These outlays and other significant information related are detailed request by request within Appendix A. The next page is funding sources are summarized on this page. These are also categorized by general fund and enterprise account, so it's just a little bit different view of the information. Recommended funding sources are borrowing within the levy limit, capital exclusions to pay those outlays within the fiscal year, and for larger expenditures, debt exclusions using bond durations not in excess of each asset's anticipated useful life. Use of a portion of free cash totaling approximately $5 million is also recommended. This is for requests of relatively small dollar amounts, many of which target capital maintenance or related improvements. For any newcomers to municipal budgeting, I'd like to just point out that free cash is really what's left at the end of the fiscal year, net of the budgeted expenses and revenue. Funding sources are detailed request by request within Appendix B. Appendix B also records as footnotes any unique request-specific funding characteristics. The next page is recommended outlays greater than or equal to $1 million. These are categorized by fund type, general enterprise, so you'll see there's a theme there. There are, conversely, as opposed to what's listed there are 56 requests recommended that are less than $1 million per. Page 5 addresses our projected tax-related impacts, and we use the mill rate, which is a common representation. Various details are included within the assumptions, and the enterprise account ratepayer references are also provided. Page 6, which is mostly blank, intentionally so, addresses debt service, principal and interest by way of amortization tables. So a revision, which were not available at the time of finalizing our report in a printed form. Those will be available. They will be posted to the revision to the report and posted to the town website. Page 7. This provides some information on our procedures. It includes our annual timeline, our use of department liaisons, some information touching on our prioritization and ranking process, and the use of certain forms and software. This year, as was initiated last year, our analysis and evaluations follow a financial policies and procedures-centric process. Our procedural recommendations and their basis are included on pages 8 and 9. These revolve around best practices. They focus on necessity and methods to strategically increase the town's capital planning, budgeting, and asset management capacity. We believe such focus is required to properly address aging capital assets, certain lack of assets, and for the protection, of built and natural resources in our changing environment. To help ensure fiscal health, improved efficiency, cost savings, and other relief, CAPCOM recommends their review and adoption. Before wrapping up, I'll just mention the other appendices, of which there are 2. Appendix C explains municipal capital funding sources. The other, Appendix D, provides a view of the town's tax rate dating back to 1971. That's a recap of our report, again, copy of which will be available on the CAPCOM's webpage. If there are any questions or comments at this time, please.
Any comments from the board?
I think it's really well done, and I thank you very much. I think it's,
Thank you.
yeah, you guys are doing a great job on it.
Jim?
So I don't have any questions at all because it was so comprehensive, thorough, and easy to read that it went a couple of layers below my usual level of questioning. So I appreciate that's obviously a huge improvement over the last several years, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. It's truly a team effort, and actually, if there's no other questions,
Well, I just want
yeah,
to
please.
throw in my gratitude as well, because I, as the select board member who sat on Capcom throughout the whole season, and all the procedures and methods and everything that you see, Stephen actually uses that. It's not just on paper. So it's very thorough. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, as I said, it's truly a team effort. And before signing off, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank my fellow committee members, some of who couldn't be here this evening, for their stick-to-itiveness. So thanks to them all. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to acknowledge our town manager, Libby, our finance director, Brian, finance staff, Allie and Rebecca, and the department heads and their support staff, because the success of the capital improvement plan depends on their input and contributions of each of them, and we really thank them for their help. That's all I have.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
If the board has any other questions or comments, anyone from the public like to, Rick?
Thanks. My name is Rick Atherton. One question I had going through one of the specific projects, and Baxter Road did catch my attention, and it might be helpful to remind us all, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a first $500,000 capital article for Baxter Road, and there was a fair amount of discussion about the repayment mechanism for that capital article. Is that still open, or did that get repositioned?
That is a damage award, potentially.
Okay.
So it's being held, so yes, it's still open.
It's still open?
Yep.
All right.
The item in here would be for the beginnings of professional services for design for relocation options for Baxter Road.
That's good. And the repayment mechanism is from the borrowing, which would be paid for by the taxpayers? Just to be clear.
I believe it was a sewer enterprise fund appropriation. I did not bring that with me, but I can.
The utilities, there's sewer and water in the road, so
Yeah, I think this
I
was
think
the
when we have
sewer
a chance, we might just
enterprise
clarify
item.
that.
Yep, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Anyone else like to speak on Capcom? Okay. Do you need a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you again, Stephen.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the second item in citizen department request, review of questions from Nantucket Coastal Conservancy regarding amendment to existing license with SPPF. I think, Spruce, you were going to open it up? No? Is that right, Dan? And Mr. Pucci is on his way. He'll be here any minute, so we can go ahead and start.
Do you want me to wait for Mr. Pucci? I was just at the ZBA meeting and they were getting close to wrapping up.
I just saw something come through, an email or text that they were on their way.
Okay. What's your
Is
call?
the board okay starting without Mr. Pucci? Or would you like to wait and go on to the public hearings?
I'm just going to give an introduction anyway, so maybe
Sure,
that might
okay.
buy time.
Yep.
For the record, my name is Burton Balkine. You guys might know me as Spruce. And I didn't really have time to go over my notes, so I'm just going to read for what I have here, not make it easier for everyone. So let's see. I just want to thank you for voting, the board, for voting unanimously on the December 19th to direct town council to answer questions in writing about the licensing, leasing of the town-owned beach below the bluff in Sconset to SBPF. I also like to thank you for putting this matter on the agenda this evening for public discussion, as we believe the more citizens can become better informed about this matter, it will be better for all of us. We have also received and reviewed the memorandum prepared by the town council, and we have 3 points to make in regards to the town council's responses. We also want to raise a broader set of questions posed in a document dated April 18th. And finally, we would like to put this discussion to a larger context in the Coastal Community Resiliency Plan. And members of our team will address each one of these issues that I've just mentioned. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Spruce.
Again, my name's Rick Atherton. I'll start. First of all, I think the response by town council were clear, concise, understandable, and we appreciate that. There are a couple points which I think, at least in my mind, it would be helpful to get a little more clarification or just understanding on. And the first one has to do with the fact that the license, as we understand, can be terminated unconditionally, and that he's quite clear about that a number of times. But I think there's a little bit difference when he then goes on to talk about the board's ability to, and I'll quote, to require the removal of the coastal engineering structure. And it's a little further on, it's not on page 1. And in his comments on that item, he seems to be making it clear that the board probably has to make some determinations in that case. And I think it would be helpful to be clear about that. And maybe there's a difference between the ability to terminate the license and the ability to request removal of the project if it ever comes to that. I think it's helpful to remind us the discussion about the license at the moment is just regarding the extension of the license, and it concerns the issue of the additional footage, not very much for the return. So it's limited in this specific instance, but the questions I think are going to be valid when we get to the expanded project, and there'll be similar concerns by members of the public because that is an article at town meeting. So that's one item that I think to be clear about. The other one is at least some confusion, I think, among members of the board and listening to your own questions about each other, to each other, had to do with the fact that the license covers a project that has an approval, and the license might be construed to run with that approval time frame. I think of, and the Concom initial approval for the current 900 feet was for 3 years with an extension opportunity for 3 more. The applicant came in and asked for an extension of 1 year. My general understanding, and I'm not the expert here, so here's a question for you or for the Natural Resources Director, is that a permit is more, gives time for the owner of the property or the applicant to construct the project, make sure it's working properly in conformance with all the conditions, and then at the end of that 3-year or an extended period of time, usually the applicant would ask for a determination of compliance and go to the Concom and say, I assume I'm in compliance with all the terms and conditions. And at that point, the project remains in place forever. So the license, presumably, as it's written, would remain open. It doesn't have a termination date and would cover that normal situation. This may not be normal, but I think it would be helpful to clarify that that's the board's intention, that if, for example, the current project ends its term and receives a certificate of appropriateness or whatever the term is for that document, that the license is intended to cover its continued performance in perpetuity. The other issue that I think we all ought to focus in on again is one we've talked about before, and that is paragraph 8 of the MOU. Council's sort of comments on this say that it's not ripe. The board hasn't determined whether it has any intention of cost sharing. And let me just read the first part of the paragraph so people know what I'm talking about. Paragraph 8 of the MOU begins with, the parties agree to diligently pursue, and then there's some language, including an agreement on cost sharing and possible betterments. So the board has agreed, along with SBF, to pursue that. And clearly any such cost sharing would have to go to town meeting approved, and the board would have to, I understand from town council, take specific action to actually want to do that and recommend how to go about that. My concern is, well, that may be legally true. I think citizens who read Article 8 are not going to focus on the but. They're going to focus on the first part of the language of paragraph 8, which, as I said, the parties agree to diligently pursue. And I think that implies, at least to me, and I think most readers of this, it will imply you intend to diligently pursue cost sharing. Not that you wrote the article or SBPF wrote the article or that paragraph intending that it had no intention. So our concern about that is that I think you may be out in front of where you really are in terms of that article, but we don't know that for sure at this point. I think before town meeting, you'll want to be clear on what the expectations are.
Right.
So those are the comments we have.
Yeah, I can answer the last one. I think, and Rick and I, we've had this discussion before. I think that this, my understanding of cost sharing was their discussions from the SBPF side of how do you get people across the road and widen the number of people if it were bettered. How do you widen that? And in order to do that, they would need, some sort of help from us, some sort of community diff or whatever, some sort of tax mechanism to include more people out there. So I think that was the intent, at least from my perspective. It wasn't to charge the taxpayers. It was actually to protect the taxpayers from having to pay for this. And I think that was the intent of this, not to charge the taxpayers for this. And my understanding of what's happened on their side is people in Sconset can't agree to how they're going to do it. So they had talked about bringing that to the board about a year ago and didn't come with it because there were some people that were very opposed to it. So I think that it was more to that issue, not necessarily to the issue of of us recommending or town meeting approving the taxpayers paying for this. I don't think that will ever happen. So anyway,
I understand. I think we all would benefit from if that's the board as a whole's understanding of this. And I can go back to discussions at the time. I don't know if that was as clear by other board members as it is to Matt. I think the board might want to make a statement in that regard. You might want to issue the board's understanding of paragraph 8 is that it concerns a betterment mechanism or some mechanism to help the residents of Sconset pay as they intend to pay, not that the board itself is considering any taxpayer funding. And make it clear so there could be no misunderstanding about it. Because I don't think when you just read this without any knowledge, you're necessarily going to get to the understanding that Matt has.
I would think that that's something that could be clarified with discussion with the SBPF attorney, because they had approached us about trying to figure something out in terms of a betterment district that's in the immediate surroundings. But it hasn't gone any further.
Did everybody hear that?
Could you hear me? No, sorry.
Just turn it down a little bit like this. There you go.
I would think that we could figure something like that out to clarify it with SBPF's attorney, because they did approach us with a preliminary discussion of a betterment district of some sort in the area. I don't remember the details, and it hasn't gone any further, but my understanding, not being there when this was originally entered into, is similar to Matt's.
But no, I appreciate that, Dawn. I think they're not mutually exclusive, however. That's why clarification, in addition to such contact they'd made with you,
Understood.
would be helpful.
Okay.
Just for the record, I would agree with your guys' assessment. I mean, in all the conversations I've ever had since I've been on the board, there's never been even an inkling of taxpayer sharing some of this cost. Yeah.
Okay. To continue our comments, as Spruce said, I'm Barbara Bund, and I'm going to broaden this issue somewhat. We found on the town website for a while, and it seems to have disappeared, a document dated 4/18/18. The title is Select Board Meeting SBPF Proposed Project Expansion Request. The following is what is being gathered, reviewed, worked on by staff, and it's a list of issues and questions, which, as I said, we didn't find it there right now, but that's not our problem. We do have it, and we would like to suggest to you, please, these questions really need to be addressed before you go ahead with stuff. There are 13 items here. You have copies of this. I'm certainly not going to read these to you, but they seem to be in a number of categories. One has to do my categories, not yours. So, but costs and liabilities of town, to town and to the taxpayers of going ahead and of not going ahead. Okay, so there were several questions that fell under that umbrella. There was also a set of questions that had to do with the sand. Where would it come from? What was the impact on the infrastructure of the delivery of the sand, and so on. These are all questions we think are great. And there was one about a good scientific review of adverse impacts of either expanding or removing. And these are wonderful questions, okay? And you folks, we believe, have a fiduciary responsibility to get them answered. And we want to suggest a moral responsibility, maybe, to let us understand the answers. So we want to draw your attention, please, to these questions and say, please don't go ahead with anything until you and we have answers to the questions that you guys raised in April. Yes?
Thank you.
Just to clarify, to make sure I understood that those are questions that are on our website unanswered. They're just there.
I believe Rick and Deanne brought to my attention, and I'm going to try to find where it is on the website. And if it's not there, to me, it looked like something that town administration had kind of put together of everything that we were discussing. I think. Oh, you found it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are all the topics we're evaluating and trying to consider and have an impact.
Well, some
So-
we are, some the Concom is.
Right.
Some of this is in our jurisdiction.
Well, we meaning,
yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
I remember this list of
But
questions.
it's on Greg. It's under the SPPF page on the website. Okay.
Making sure.
Okay. All right. it's not clear, we'll make sure it's clear
Okay.
on that page.
But we'd also like the public to see it because they are really excellent issues. And if we can discuss them together, that would help us all become better informed and have a good understanding of what's involved. And we had talked about maybe even that being the topic of a workshop meeting. And if we could do it before town meeting, because there is an article at town meeting, that would be extremely beneficial. Okay. I'm Deanne Atherton, and to just kind of make our third point, while we're looking at this whole issue so closely and really in detail, where we're trying to understand the legal implications of a license or a memorandum of understanding, we thought it would be really helpful to put it in the larger context that sometimes we get, so tunnel vision, and that is in an island-wide context of the coastal resiliency effort that we're doing, and the fact that we don't yet have a plan. And the decisions that you are making and the decisions that Concom are making in regard to Sconset are going to have impacts, and how really pressing and important it is to have an island-wide coastal resiliency plan. And as you know, we participated in the workshop last week. Was it last week? January 7th. And when we broke up into groups, you, the town of Nantucket, provided us with these resource maps. Greg, I don't know if you can bring them up for me. And what it did is it provided the facts. It provided data for all of us as we were going through the exercises to try and identify where the vulnerabilities in the island were. What areas of our island are vulnerable in a time of climate change and sea level rise. And we were given these maps, which Greg is putting up, and they're all various maps, and they show, this one shows, this is town, this is high water line. Greg, we could go, and you see here in Popus Harbor, again, the numbers, this is the west end of the island. This is very interesting. This talks about hurricanes and areas of the island that are at risk. And you see there, the big yellow on the right is Sacagawea Pond. There's concern of breaching the Great Pond. Down the red blotch, down in the sort of lower right, is Tom Nevers Pond, and that area all along the south shore, up on the west end, around, you see inundation at Brant Point. The takeaway here are the erosion levels, and those red arrows are where the erosion is going. Again, look at it island-wide. And what you see here is that Sconset is not pulsing red on all of this. That there are many areas of Nantucket that are at risk and that are vulnerable and should be a priority for us. And unfortunately, so much of our time and energy and resources is focused in on one small area of the island. And fortunately, we're moving beyond that, and we're looking at island-wide, and we're trying to assess the risk. And I think this is just a step forward that we support wholeheartedly, and it helps put in context what's happening in Sconset to a small portion of northern Baxter Road. And that's it. So we thank you for bringing this forward and allowing us to have this discussion in public, and we hope to have more.
Thank you, Dan. I think on your third point, paragraph 8, we can get a clarification on that. I think we all agreed. I saw everybody shaking their head. And then if there's anything for the second one, like the right to revoke and then expiration dates, if there's any other clarifications, we can look into that along with, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rita.
No, you keep going on your list. That was.
Yep, those are, I'm just kind of summarizing what was just said.
No, I think that's good. If you're done, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to thank the Coastal Conservancy for keeping this as a conversation. In this format, it's a little bit beyond the specific project, and I think that more and more, the conversation around sea level rise, erosion, climate change is one that we are going to have to deal with, and it's not going to be an easy conversation. So the more educated we are, the more resources we have available when people want them, the more we'll all be able to have informed conversations. And one of the things discovered over the weekend, it's actually in this map book that I'll share with everyone, is basically taking all those maps that you were showing there, Deanne, and putting them into an investment priority green infrastructure map, which identifies the most vulnerable areas, and then we look at our limited natural resources and our financial resources, and then we have that template for how to make decisions after that, which is what I think I'm really looking for from our coastal resiliency plan. And I also just want to throw out there that I've been doing a lot of reading about climate change, and a line that really stuck with me that I'm going to throw out there now is that as policymakers, what we have to keep in our mind is that we are trying to manage the unavoidable and avoid the unmanageable. So as we look at the decisions that we have to make, we have to look at it in the bigger context. So I just wanted to, again, thank the Coastal Conservancy for bringing this up above and beyond project-specific forums. So,
Thank you, Rita. I had two things written down: the coastal resiliency plan completion, and what's the balance of retreat versus protect for the long term. It's a big,
huge.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, what you're talking about, the Dutch do this with a cost-benefit analysis. They look at an area, and if it's worth saving, and there's enough, reason to save it, they'll find a way to do it. If there isn't, they don't. And that's sort of what we in our head all do that kind of naturally and say, okay, downtown, we've got to do something there. And some of the other areas, we know it doesn't make sense. And so that's but that has to be put into a filter, and you have to be able to, come up with the right answers, which I'm not so sure the process we started is going to do right away. It's not going to happen, I don't think, in this rendition, but I think it has to happen in the next rendition. But
Just a couple of us attended that coastal resiliency workshop, and there were subject matter experts from all facets of the island who attended. There were 4 groups. I went expecting that the highest priority were going to be, beach erosion and those kinds of things. 2 of the groups said the focus should be on the town, and the group I was in said we should consider relocating the High Line. So we did exactly what everyone's asked. We've gotten a lot of input from experts and from the community, but we should be judicious or as they come and be supportive as they come up with answers or concerns that may not be on a map or may not reflect what some in different groups share. So,
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
we could go on forever.
I know. It's a good conversation. You guys happy? Okay. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the public hearing section. Mr. Pucci, I thought you were you're okay. I thought you were on your way, so I started. And
music to my ears.
So our first public hearing tonight, so I'd like to open the public hearing to consider an application for new annual all alcoholic beverage general on-premise license for the Nantucket Dreamland. And we're gone, Amy Baxter must have just stepped away, and we can't really do much without her.
I'm going to step away from these 2 and the last one.
1, 2, and 6?
Yep, 1, 2, and 6.
Okay.
I'll be back for 3.
All right. Chief's going to go see if she just stepped out for a second. Sorry, Amy, we went maybe faster than you thought.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So we just start with number 1. I just opened the public hearing.
Like winning an Oscar and being in the bathroom. Good evening. First, we are dealing with the Dreamland liquor license application. For this application, licensing in the town, pretty much we discussed this with the Dreamland and asked them to come forward and apply for a full liquor license. As we've discussed before, the state law for temporary permitting one-day licenses, the maximum is a maximum of 30 one-day licenses in 1 year to prevent someone from going around getting a full liquor license. In the past, we've just been permitting public events, nonprofit type of fundraisers, things of that sort, and have stayed away from private events. But speaking with the state and really kind of looking into it, we should be permitting any type of event that is having liquor at a publicly accessed building such as the Dreamland, because they do operate as an event facility. If we were to do that, they would be over that limit easily. So this is just a better way to have them licensed and throughout the year monitor the situation. They would be a general on premises, which does not require a common vicular or food service. It would be for special events. Another location that has this type of license is the White Heron Theater. So it would allow them to have special events. One thing that I put in the comments, obviously there is a theater. They are looking to serve in the theater for special events and for other types of shows in the theater. I don't believe, and I'll let them speak to this as well, for every single show that they have in the theater. But one thing I did is I looked through the state and through theater operations like AMC theaters across the state and across the country as far as how they regulate these types of things. Obviously, you're mixing a lot of people into a dark space. Things can get, transferred. You might have some children or some underage folks in some of these things. So some of the conditions that are applied in these areas are the containers for which alcohol is served is of different shape and color than, if I got a 7-Up or something of that sort. So staff coming through can obviously identify who is having alcohol. You have to have a ticket to the event or the theater to purchase alcohol. You're not coming off the street, going up and getting a drink and drinking in the lobby. Everyone is carded. That comes up for that situation, and only 1 drink per person. They're not buying multiple drinks for people in the theater. And again, that is standard pretty much across theaters like AMC brand and things of that sort in Massachusetts. So if approved, those would be conditions we would be looking for. Okay.
Just a reminder for the board and the public. So we'll, Amy usually walks us through. The applicant can speak. Then we take public comment. The board asks questions with the applicant and with Amy, and then we close the public hearing, and then we make a decision. So now, if the applicant would like to speak, please do.
Hi, my name is Alicia Carney. I'm here representing the Dreamland. Amy, to answer your question about that, it would be discretionary beer and wine sales. Some of you have attended our programming events that we've done where we've had a bar in the lobby. Our goal is not to offer beer and wine necessarily for everyone. So that provides a little bit more clarification for you. Otherwise, of course, this would help us streamline our operations, have a little bit more control over alcohol compliance, and we see it as a major financial benefit to the sustainability of our year-round operation.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody like to speak on this? Any public comment? Any questions from the board for Amy or for the Dreamland? Okay. We'll close the public hearing. It's a pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to approve the license request.
Yes. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. I'd like to open the public hearing to consider application for modification of the entertainment license for the Nantucket Dreamland Foundation.
Okay, so for this license for the Dreamland, they, of course, have had an entertainment license over the years that includes the theater and for special events, live entertainment. They have weddings and things of sorts inside. One of the restrictions, as we have here on the license, specifically says that there is no music, live entertainment of any kind on the balcony that is attached to the Harbor View Room, which overlooks Easy Street in that location. What the Dreamland would like to do is to be able to have the live entertainment, such as a DJ or band of some kind, located on the actual balcony. As we put in the comments, I think I included a map in there as well that showed, similar licenses that might have some outdoor music in the area. A couple things that pointed out would be that other licenses are streaming music on some patios in the restaurants in that area. There's no live music outside on those patios. And those are situations in that, if you want to take Ventuno, where their main restaurant is separate from that patio, so they're streaming music in a separate area. In this instance, the Harborview Room, that's a studio, one more. The Harborview Room, if you've been there, and the patio are one. There's several French doors that open up out onto it. They've had some events. As I mentioned in the comments, we did get some noise complaints this summer for some of those events because the speakers are in the room there. You can hear it on the street just as well as if they were on the balcony as well. So that would be the difference, is that we don't really have licenses around there that have live music outside. It's mostly streaming music outside.
A question of before Dreamland comes up. For NHA and their parties up top
Yeah,
there,
so-
can they do that anytime they want, or are those one-offs?
They do have an entertainment license for that. There are some limitations on that. They've pulled back a little bit on that. I think the first year or two we did have some issues with them being so high. It obviously streaming out towards the yacht club and down that street that way too as well. But they do have, I have that on the map as well, that's included. They do have a license for that. And again, that is a separate facility. So it's a little bit, it is on the roof and a little bit kind of a different situation. So.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak?
So we are, our initiative is to be able to offer speakers, for example, on the terrace or an actual DJ out there, which really is an extension of our Harborview Room. I'm not sure, when the building was built, of course, we have an entertainment license that covers the entire premise. I don't know if it just sort of is an afterthought that we didn't include the terrace, but it's something that we're hoping to just streamline across the board so that, again, we're complying with town noise ordinance. We have less business interruption with, police or anybody needing to dispatch resources to come and kind of discuss the noise complaints that we're having in that particular neighborhood. So we fully intend to, stay within the town ordinance, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. We, of course, have other entertainment factors that take place in the building during the same time. So often we actually don't have a lot of live music or any amplified music in the Harborview Room because the main theater sits below that. So that's something we're very cognizant of in terms of our operating, schedule.
I just wanted to add, as I didn't say before, that the balcony, it was very specifically put as an exception on the entertainment license when it originally was issued. It wasn't left off. It was specifically put on there during the vote as far as no outdoor music. So that part, it was specifically put on the license, that terminology. And secondly, as we put in the recommendations, if it were to be approved, that we would certainly ask for, like she's saying, limitations and only a limited number of special events if they were to do so. And in those cases, as we have on other licenses, that it would be a notification so we would know when those dates were. And I would actually ask for a butter notification too as well if that was going to be allowed.
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm just wondering, how many of those events do you have already that are up in the Harborview Room?
So we haven't outlined any yet for this upcoming season. We had 4 total last season that were the DJ series that we hosted.
Yeah.
And just also to reiterate, we don't have a power source on that terrace that actually can support live bands necessarily. So I don't know that we're going to be aggressively scheduling anything, this season. We kind of have to ease into it as we've done with a lot of our programming. And of course, if there's any concern with decibel readings, that's something we're very cognizant of, especially with our neighbors. Something we would absolutely have full intention of complying with if we had a set decibel reading.
The licensing recommendations that were made with the speaker being restricted in size, the limitation on the number of events, and the no music after 10 p.m. are those all limitations that would still work for what you have planned?
Certainly no music after 10 p.m. We would still be in compliance with that. The speakers, we would want the flexibility to have speakers either outside or inside on that terrace, or inside the harbor view room. The way we operated that last year was we actually had our speakers inside the harbor view room, but as Amy pointed out, we have French doors that open up, 3 sets of French doors that open up to the terrace, so there's really not much of a difference with the sound amplification outside.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe, do you need this? If it's, because I had my wedding reception up there and it was loud enough on the outside and the insides. I'm wondering what the difference is having it out there versus having them right at the edge
Sure.
inside the room.
Great question. I think from a Dreamland perspective, again, as just being very black and white, I think we just want to be well within our compliance of our licensing regulations, and we want to be able to say that yes, we absolutely have full, permission from the town to have speakers or amplified music outside. I don't want us to operate in the gray. I think that it's not in our best interest as we continue to grow and evolve.
This is a question for Amy. We've been pretty diligent about restricting amplified music in that geographic area. I know in other applications have come up.
We have been, and we're certainly working on a more uniformed approach to this, especially in that district. I don't want to push one way or the other. I want to give you both sides of kind of what you can consider as well. There certainly she's saying there's no power source outside, which true. I know that the DJ has been actually set up outside this summer at events, and the speakers are inside. The difference, that's from an event planning perspective. Obviously, they want to be able to just have the freedom for those options. It is going to increase the noise, but it,
So I just looked up. I didn't know how noise travels.
Yeah, I learned that lesson this week.
And it travels down. And
Yes.
it actually. So that's something to be,
It's line of sight, and Jamie Holworth sat with me for 2 hours this week and explained to me how sound travels, so I have a little bit of insight into that now. So yeah, it certainly is going to be line of sight. There's certainly...
But also it does travel down.
Correct,
It's
exactly.
It's not just line of sight.
Yes,
I was hoping it traveled up.
Yeah, no.
But it doesn't travel up. It travels down and out.
Yes, no, I agree. I had that conversation this week myself, so it was enlightening. Yes, there's... Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll open up for the public. Anybody like to speak on this?
Hi, my name is Robert Young. I'm a neighbor and a supporter of the Dreamland and everything they do. I think the important thing for me is we've got a lot of restaurants in that area that have amplified music at night. As Jim mentioned, it's come up in the past. It can be a problem, especially after 10 at night. And it seems to get louder after 11, actually. But I think my concern for the Dreamland is they have French doors. They can keep the speakers inside. They can have people on the patio or on the deck, as it were, being entertained. And I don't know why you need to have your doors open and the music going full blast when you can be in an air-conditioned environment and still have access to the deck as well. So whatever you decide, I hope that you consider the number of events. We certainly wouldn't want to see that every night. And then also a limit on the time. I understand that they've suggested 9 or 10 at night. I appreciate that. I think that would be very fair. It's the same that applies to the residential neighborhoods, as it should downtown. And maybe just some kind of a limit, so it's not an every night event, which it will morph into eventually, as many of these do. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to speak?
Good evening. Jonathan Wraith, owner of 14 Easy Street and supporter of the Dreamland. I back up Robert's feelings about the Dreamland's proposal. I guess my concern is that, the amplified music that you spoke of earlier in the meeting and how it just continues to spread throughout town. And, if the Dreamland is having events, again, my hope would be it would be limited, and the time of 10 o'clock, I'd rather see it a little earlier, like maybe 9:30, because residual noise continues after a certain hour, and someone's having fun, one more song goes to 10, 10:30, the police get called, they stop it and shut it down. I also know that is kind of the really last residential area. It is a residential area downtown, and noise does travel straight out and it does travel down. I don't know, it doesn't seem like there's anyone else here to represent Old North Wharf tonight, but I'm sure there would be a lot of owners there that would also have some concerns about, really, I think the big thing here is the noise. I was on my balcony on 14 East Street several times last year when there were a number of DJ events. I didn't really have a problem with the events, and they seemed to shut down around 9:30. And I like, hey, this is great. The Dreamland's benefiting from this, and people are having fun. And it's as probably many of you know, if you've been up there, it's a beautiful view. It's a really, really great place to be and enjoy an evening. So my hope here is that there can be some mutual agreement that it is limited and the hours are limited as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Attorney Arthur Reed. I represent Bob Champion, Brewster Equities, which owns the property right across the street from the Dreamland. There's been a continuing problem with restaurant noise in the area late at night, which has been very disturbing to my clients' tenants, and we will be in further contact with the town about some of that with regard to additional licensing matters that may come up. In any event, we would second and support all the comments that both Robert Young and Jonathan Wraith made, and we're all for the Dreamland, but we think that that type of condition on the license would be entirely appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other questions for Amy or the applicant from the board?
I have one.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if there's a situation ever where if the music itself ended earlier, say 9:30, because it says here the doors should be closed at that time. I'm just wondering if
For
there's
the
a
other
way to-
restaurants that have that in their license. That's a term that's been put in the licenses along South Water Street. For Rose and Crown and things, they have all those doors that open out into the street.
Mm-hmm.
Their license requires them, as did Station 21 when it was there, that they were to close doors and windows at 10 p.m. So it's a similar condition that is put, but then across the street there's 2 patios with music.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other public comment, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion or thoughts from the board? Dawn?
Yeah, I'm concerned about amplified music outside in general. I'm particularly concerned about it being up high in an area that's very wide open where it can travel across the water and hit a lot of residences and probably even potentially out to where boats are parked. But I think that it is in town, and maybe a reasonable compromise would be to give a time limit for anything amplified of 9 p.m. because I agree that there's usually that one more song and people who are loudly talking as the music's winding down, that kind of thing. And I think that we should put a limitation on the number of amplified events that are allowed to go into the outside, like 6.
I would agree with that. Yeah, and I was thinking 6 as well, if they're doing 4 already, and see how the 6 go.
Jim?
I have a question for Amy. How many applicants have we had that have requested amplified music in that we've said
In that
no to?
area?
Yeah.
There are
And
currently...
wasn't the one on Broad Street, didn't they ask for amplified music?
Yes, so that I believe the last time we dealt with that specifically was Graydon House,
Yeah.
and there was some, discussion about the level and what they were
And the
doing.
doors open, and I mean, we've had... And
Right. So
what did we do with them?
So along Broad Street there is streaming kind of background music on their patio. On Nantucket Prime at the top of Broad Street is allowed, background streaming music.
And I think it was only during meals
Correct.
The one on
With
Graydon?
people out there, yes, and because we had it.
Because there was a question that people like, well, we're going to be serving alcohol, and
Right.
people might want to stay for
And
a
we
couple
had a-
drinks after. We said no.
Correct.
It's only for the dinner service.
Correct, for dinner service.
And it was not amplified.
Well, we're working on this too as well as far as that definition of amplified.
Right.
All of this is plugged into something. So in a sense, it is coming through a speaker, or coming through their Sonos system or whatever that house system is.
But I'm thinking we're talking about live music here
Correct.
that comes.
This is different.
It's not. It is amplified. I mean, it doesn't
Correct.
come. It comes out one way, and it
Yeah.
comes out, and it's amplified, and it's
Yes.
louder.
The additional speakers
So
then.
the Graydon House, was not live music.
It's not live
We said
music.
no to live music
We said no to live music.
at all. No live music.
Correct.
And no amplification.
The
So
Whaling
they
Museum is the only place where on that roof that they have been allowed to have occasional limited type of DJ or guitar or whatever it is up there as well. They have some sponsored events as
But
well.
it's not amplified.
Well, it does have to be plugged into something. So there is like
Right.
small speakers, but that is the only location. The other lower locations, again, Town, Ventuno, and those two on Broad Street as well have patio streaming only while folks are outside. But
So
those go to
so
1 a.m.
I'm also just thinking about the precedent of it. If we give quote amplified music, and
Right.
So that was my concern.
And we do have things coming up that are going to address these questions again, other license applications
Being
that
push
are
for
coming.
it?
So it's not
Even they'll be asking for.
in February and March, correct, that will come up to this question again.
What does that mean?
That means it's something that will have to be, this isn't like the last time this probably question
So you
will
have
be
other
asked.
applicants who are coming forward like to change their license to
That- a
add
new license.
to add amplification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's even causes me more concern.
Just put my 2 cents in. If we were to approve this, I like the conditions that licensing has provided one small speaker only, no music after 10. I'd be fine with 9:30. Don, you said 9. And then limit it to 4 or 6. And then seeing how it goes and if there's no
Right.
complaints. If we start at 4, go to 6. Or the small speaker kind of like what's small?
Yeah, and when we had the events this summer, a lot of the speakers and the equipment were literally in the door jam. I have videos of that. So, it's space and how close to the door is it. There's ways to do that sort as well. So I think limitations and also notification to us and the neighbors as well. When we do that sort of situation too, it helps with an up front. So people aren't just suddenly like, wait, where did that come from?
I think this would be different if there was no entertainment in the Harbor View room at all.
Right. Still going to be.
entertainment. It's already there. We're just talking about extending it for a couple nights. And if there's a time limit, so I'm comfortable
Right.
with some form of the conditions.
Right.
Just to let the board know where I stand.
And I definitely would like to see the notice to licensing and abutters, not as a should, but as a definite.
Yeah.
I think this is something that they've been doing already. And to me, I don't think it really compares to Graydon House or a restaurant, which is every night amplification. This is more event-based, and I suppose we have the opportunity to reduce the number further if it really becomes an issue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Correct.
We ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions. Actually, I don't care about the speaker size personally because I think it's all about how high you turn it up. But about noticing the abutters, limiting it to 6, and I would like to see it end at 9 p.m.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Can I just clarify? Is it music stops at 6, but doors close at 10?
She's saying music stops at 9.
Sorry,
Only
9.
6 events.
Sorry, I meant-
Outdoors, I don't mind if it's inside and the doors are closed because they're allowed to do that already.
I'm just wondering, if that, like the music
Inside.
stops at 9 and then everyone's inside.
That would be balcony.
Yeah.
They certainly are welcome to still be out on the balcony.
Okay.
We can't, regulate the human voice at that point.
Yeah.
So, in the interior of the building is already licensed.
Okay.
Until 1 a.m.
I see. Okay.
So if we were to approve with this motion, at 9 o'clock, they would take the speakers and they would move them 5 feet in. No, really, right?
Yeah,
We should say it's okay.
correct.
And
They would
close
have
the
to
door
be
and
taken
close the
in.
doors.
Well,
Yeah.
we're saying the doors have to be closed at 9 as well.
Yes.
Because right now, they can be
Yes.
open until 10.
Right.
if the speakers are inside.
That would be
So that changes.
correct.
the hardware
Yes,
room
because then
license.
it's correct.
That's the motion. So,
Well, I need to clarify.
I would like to see those doors closed at 9.
me too.
No matter what. Okay.
They can go in and out of them, but they're closed,
Okay.
and there's no music outside.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed 4-0. If you need any clarification,
Yeah, no,
because there's
yeah.
And
Okay.
if it goes beautifully and we need to
Yep.
rediscuss it
Sure.
next year.
One thing that I need you to back up and take a vote on is because the Dreamland is within 500 feet of St. Mary's, is to make the determination that is not detrimental to the spiritual activities of St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church.
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that was for the first one.
Correct.
Right,
Oh,
Walker
I'm
Lodge.
sorry. That is for the Dreamland, correct, in St. Mary's. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to open a public hearing to consider application for new annual all alcoholic beverages at 130 Pleasant Street for Special Grapes LLC.
Great. Okay. So we'll go up more. Up more. Yeah, that's Dreamland. So this is for 130. No, that says Dreamland.
I wasn't going to try to say the name. I'd probably mess it up.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I will too. Petrichor
Petrichor.
Wine Bar. So I'll give you a little bit background on that. Petrichor Wine Bar, if you know the name, was operating under the license for Hotel Pippa this summer. It's Hotel Pippa between the hotel and their space there. Jill Vaselli was the liquor license manager and operated a wine bar in that location. She is now moving out and wanting to open it under her LLC at this location, 130 Pleasant Street. It formerly was Atlas Restaurant and licensed as Atlas Restaurant until earlier this year. It was not renewed. They vacated the premises earlier this year, so we did not renew it at renewal time this year, so it was vacant for that. So this is a new license application. A couple things I have to review that were included in the packet. In the past, there are a couple things. There are some attorneys here too that can answer some questions, but there is a current litigation and regarding, I think, past actions with the planning board and 130 Pleasant Street regarding required parking. And I think a few years ago we discussed they came in to apply for lunch service, and that's where this is. And again, I'll let them speak to the details to that if we need to do so. About parking spaces having enough, the parking spaces along the side belonging to the neighboring property at Island Kitchen in that area too as well. So 130 Pleasant Street has the 4 parking spaces in front, which is not enough to accommodate a 48-seat restaurant. In the past, what has happened is agreements are needed with adjacent properties that aren't open at the time, such as a pharmacy and other restaurants, and what I have understood from planning and from Andrew Vorse went over this with me is that what this applicant has to do is if the license is approved for this location, she has already gone forward and have signed agreements with the pharmacy for several spaces as well as Roasted, which is behind Island Kitchen there for an additional 12 spaces, I believe, which would put it over what the requirements are for parking. What the applicant would need to do is to open the public hearing with the planning board to get the special permit approved with those agreements, such as the previous applicants have done. She's not asking for any different license than existed before. She's not asking for lunch, just for dinner and Sunday brunch. So from my understanding is that it can be approved with that condition with the planning board, and that was approved by them as far as conditions. Again, there are other sides to this story as far as that litigation, but from what I understand, that would be our option there. Everything else she's asking for is a wine bar. There's not going to be renovations or anything different to that facility, so it would be asking for the annual restaurant all alcohol license as existed before with Atlas and Pozzo before that.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak? Okay.
Not yet. You have to address anything. She's here to do so, and
Right.
there might be others, though I know that.
Yep.
Need to speak.
Does anybody in the public like to speak? Arthur?
Yeah, my name is Arthur Reed, and I represent the owner of the premises. I do not represent the applicant in this matter. I was aware that there would be some suggestion that there would be the need to go back to the planning board for modification of the existing special permit. We disagree with that. The property has a very extensive and I think confusing history with regard to the permitting, going back to a Board of Appeals decision and then planning board decisions once this came under the jurisdiction of the planning board. Because it's in the Mid-Island Overlay District, the permitting has more recently all been handled by the planning board. There were then there was the most recent application that was made, that was acted upon by the planning board, and the planning board filed a decision involving an application that had been filed when Atlas was in the property. Basically allowed additional seats and made and determined that a waiver of off-street parking was justified without any further reference to there being any off-site parking. In any event, we then made two later applications to the planning board, one to remove the prohibition against lunch service, which had been in an earlier decision. That's moot in this instance because we understand that our proposed tenant does not intend to serve lunch, at least not at this time. The other application was to have the existing parking confirmed. Both of those decisions were constructively granted because the planning board decision was not timely filed. And as a result of that, we believe that the present use of the premises and the present parking condition on the premises is authorized by the existing decisions, and that no further planning board action is necessary. Apart from that, it's my understanding, although I don't have them, that the applicant here has in fact obtained, as Amy indicated, permission from both Alan Bell, the owner of the Island Pharmacy, for I think 3 spaces, and then some additional spaces on the roasted premises over on Orange Street. But in any event, we are obviously in support of this application. We believe it should be granted, but we don't believe that there is a need for us to go back to the planning board for any further relief or modification of the existing permit, granted the present pose of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Rhoda?
Thank you. For the record, Attorney Rhoda Wyman. I represent Patrick Ridge, owner of 1, 2, and 4 Chins Way. And in all due respect to Mr. Reed, I totally disagree with what he just said. First of all, I've been before the planning board probably 4 or 5 times in the last few years about the parking issue. And I know you got a letter from the council, Off-Island Council, representing the property owner, saying that the property's in compliance. The property hasn't been in compliance since 2007. There was a planning board decision back then that was very clear and said that if the applicant who was running the restaurant at the time got a lease from an abutter for additional parking, that would be fine as long as that particular owner ran the restaurant. And when that owner was no longer running the restaurant, then it had to go back to the planning board. It never went back to the planning board. They went, they have increased their seating on 3 different occasions. As recently as a year ago, they got an additional 12 seats outside, but it actually went, in March of 2007, it went from 20 seats to 48 seats, and then it went again 12 additional seats. No additional parking was ever granted. They never came back to the board. So they are in violation now, and I think you'll hear Mr. Vorse tell you that as well. It's never been approved by the planning board. They need between 11 and 12 spaces, and they basically have 4 to 5 spaces in the front of the building. That's all they own. So what we, and just to be clear, my client doesn't have any problem with having a liquor license at that premises. What his concern is parking, and it has been for several years. He purchased the building behind his restaurant only for the additional parking. I mean, that's exactly why he purchased it, because prior to that, he had to have an agreement with an abutter, and each time he increased his seating, he came back and made an agreement so that he had additional off-site parking. And, you know, we feel very strongly that it should be the same for everyone. Nobody should get any special treatment on this. As far as the leases, we haven't seen the leases. We're not aware that there are leases in place. And more importantly, and really to the point, is my understanding is that these alleged leases are for evening only. And if this board is inclined to approve anything now, which I don't believe it should, because we haven't seen the leases and we've got pending litigation at the land court on this very subject of the parking. So I think this should be continued, but if you're inclined to approve it, I would ask that you not approve the Sunday brunch, because my understanding of the leases that are supposedly coming is that they're not for the daytime. My client's biggest meal of the day, of the week, is Sunday brunch, and it's not fair to approve Sunday brunch unless there's a lease that says that there's off-site parking. And we haven't seen it, and my understanding, again, is the leases that are going to appear are only for evening parking and not for Sunday parking. So if you are inclined to do an approval now, please don't include Sunday brunch, and please make certain that they abide by the rules and by what's happened at the planning board, and that they're required as a condition of this approval to go back to the planning board and deal with this parking issue. It's been going on since 2007, and it really needs to end. And it's not fair to someone that has played by the rules, has purchased another building to provide parking, and to have them, they were told at the last planning board hearing that they had to come back. This is not this applicant, this is the applicant, this is the people that ran Atlas before. They were told they had to come back with leases, and they came back to the planning board with no leases. So I would ask you to please consider that, and to please make the appropriate decision here, and not include Sunday brunch, and to either continue it or condition it about going back to the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you.
One sec, Rhoda, before you go, what's the time frame on the the legal stuff that's going on?
As far as I know, we were supposed to be in our first hearing in January, and I talked to town council, emailed with town council a week ago, and he had no further information about the timing. So we don't know that.
Andrew, do you have something?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. So I do want to point out that what Mr. Reed said before you is the basis for the litigation. So we don't agree with his position on this, and that's basically what the lawsuit is about. The constructive grant issue is something that the planning board initiated and you signed off on. The planning board had approved enforcement action against the prior owner who closed their business before it came to an actual action. So the property is out of conformance with its prior special permit. I've been in touch with our town council and the client's off-island town council has offered to enter into discussions about mitigation. And I think that issue belongs back before the planning board. So we, are typically the entity that covers this discussion about parking, making sure there's leases and everything else. That's why the condition was put in. We appreciate that fact. And I have no problem with you issuing the license with that condition. We have a huge problem if you issue it without it. And, I can tell you that I don't feel that they'll be getting building permits or any sign-offs from the office until this is properly brought back. And, it's a 48-seat restaurant with 4 parking spaces. It has got to provide some sort of mitigation. And that typically is worked out at the board level. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Any comments? Any questions for Amy, Andrew, applicant?
Did the applicant want to make a comment?
What's that?
I didn't know if the applicant said she didn't want to make a comment before. I'm not asking, I just.
A lot of this I don't understand. A lot of this is new to me. I was told there were 9 spaces, 5 along the side, 4 in the front. I have signed leases, which Amy has copies of. So those are signed. They are in the evening. I have no problem giving up Sunday brunch. Dare I compete? But 12 spaces at Roasted, 3 spaces at the pharmacy. I don't ask to do anything that wasn't done in there before. So the parking, I was told that wasn't the litigation. So a lot of this, again, I don't understand. A lot of it's new to me. But just as far as the parking goes, I got signed leases, and Amy has those. So that's the issue.
Do any of those parking spaces go with the apartment?
With the apartment, yeah, that part, I don't know that I can answer that as far as what the parking spaces are for the apartment as well. It's just the 4 in the front, and I just wanted to back up Jill, and when she first came in, did have the information and did believe she had those spaces along the side too as well. And this came up when I thought, it doesn't sound right, and I didn't think that that was right, and then we started exploring it and found out about the litigation. So to her defense, she was not aware of that when she was submitting things and that sort. So that's how this came up in this instance. But the apartment is a question I don't think I can answer that. Do you know that answer?
You know what? That's the thing for the planning board anyway.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, and that's why generally, like I said, generally we like to have the planning board and all those things that come up. This came up. We had all these different sides and opinions, and it was being litigated in my inbox. So I thought we would, come up with some way to do it conditionally. We did offer to continue the hearing. That they didn't want to do that. They wanted to at least see if we can accept it with the condition, because she has a conditional lease that is based upon approval of a license. We do this conditionally as well with health inspections, COIs. It's approved conditionally to make sure that they can have a license in that location. Then they have to go through and meet these conditions. So that makes sense.
I have not seen the lease. I believe her representation, but again, the lease is just for evening. It's not for Sunday brunch. So I think that should be off the table. And I think the applicant said it's off the table. So I'd like to confirm that and make sure that that's the case. And if Sunday brunch is off the table and you will make this decision condition upon them going back to the planning board, I think we could probably live with that.
Thank you. Arthur, do you still have something?
By our calculation, as we had submitted previously to the planning board, the number of parking spaces required under the bylaw is 13. The spaces that are provided on site are in fact 4 in front and 5 on the side. The 5 on the side are partially within the layout of Chins Way. They've been there in that location. Those parking spaces have been on the side of the building, and the landscaping has been in place and so on for more than 20 years. And as a result of that, my client has adverse possession over the rights in the way that would otherwise be held by the other property owners. My client, in fact, owns the land in that part of the way by operation of law under what's known as the derelict fee statute. That's not particularly relevant. The fact is that those spaces have been there and for the period of time that would secure my client's rights to have them. So the result is that we have 9 spaces, and with the additional parking spaces that that we understand, I haven't seen the paperwork on that either, that the tenant has been able to produce, that would seem to be more than enough to comply with the earlier planning board requirements. So again, we don't in any way contend that the issuance of the license by the selectmen would in any way preclude the planning board or the zoning enforcement officer from raising any further issue with regard to parking. But I think that is the situation as far as the parking spaces are concerned.
Thank you. Just so I want to try to, one more from Rhoda. We're going to try to get this going, so we're not here all night.
Yeah, we respectfully disagree with Mr. Reed. We do not believe that they have any rights to those parking spaces by the derelict fee statute. And more importantly, that is not a subject that should be before this board. That is a subject that should be before the land court. So I would ask you to just deal with the issue at hand. And again, if the applicant will take off the table the Sunday brunch and you agree to send this forward to the planning board as requested and as Mr. Vorse explained, then I think we could be okay with this.
I think we have Sunday brunch covered. I think we got that. Anything else, Arthur? 'Cause we got to close this up and see if anybody else wants to
For the record,
speak on this.
I disagree with Ms. Weinman just as much as she disagrees with me.
For the record,
Yes.
they both disagree.
Yeah,
Okay.
hence my email this week. So,
Is there anything else, Amy, that you want to add to this?
No,
Anybody
I
else
just-
from the public?
Yeah, just, we have to take some action, whether it's continue or with conditions.
Yep. Okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
So I have some questions. Could Andrew, would you come back and remind us what the condition you would like to see on this license is?
I'm happy with the decision that Amy put forward. I think
whatever
that's-
her wording is okay.
Yeah, and I think that the applicant will find a good reception at the planning board. It's just those are the types of things we typically, include in a special permit, make sure they're put on record, and document. So, is that
good, Jim?
Yeah. So I'm comfortable with the conditional approval based on all those conditions.
And no Sunday brunch.
No Sunday brunch, and I would make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think that motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to open the public hearing for the same property, 130 Pleasant Street, for entertainment license.
Correct. So for entertainment license, again, this is an application for what existed in this location prior to. In the comments, I included that, the history of it was when Atlas was running it. They did upgrade the fire alarm system that allowed for amplified and live music. On occasion, we limited it to twice a month. I don't think the applicant is not looking to have as, I think, a robust and vibrant live music scene as Atlas did, but they do have the fire alarm system and requirements for such a system. And I did mention that we did have occupancy issues at times with, the dancing and everything of that sort, so that just needs to be very consistent with what occupancy they are approved for. But otherwise, no objections to the same license conditions.
Okay. Any comments from the applicant? Okay. Anyone from the public like to speak on this? Any questions from the board for Amy or the applicant? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
And I thank the applicant for their patience.
Yeah. Okay, on the fifth one, open a public hearing to consider application for change of license type from restaurant to general on-premises for the box.
Yes. So this is more of an administrative task that, as we got into things, looked at the license and thought, oh, chicken box a restaurant? It is not. So a restaurant liquor license would require health inspections, things of that sort, something that they don't have. So we're looking for a general on-premises. We asked them just to go through this administrative process so that they have the correct license for their service. So that application is to change from a restaurant to a general on-premises, which does not require a common vicular.
Is the applicant here or anybody from the public like to speak on this? This is a public hearing. Any questions for Amy before we close it? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. What would the board like to do?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. Our last public hearing of the night is to consider application for a mobile food unit license for Nantucket Pokey. I think I'm saying that right. This is 61 Sparks Ave at the Boys and Girls Club.
Yes. So, can you move up to the license one that I did? So I put, no, other way. This is for a mobile food unit. Okay, there you go. So I kind of did a draft of a mobile food unit license. We kind of updated a little bit to have the information that we kind of go through. I know it gets confusing sometimes with this. So this applicant is proposing to do a mobile food unit. I think the name describes the type of food, although I'm not familiar with it, but we have the menu included there as well. So we currently have been approved by Health. They went through the plan review system and Health was approved them to move forward for licensing. They have a commercial kitchen lease with the Boys and Girls Club. We have some blackout dates there that they can't use the kitchen, but otherwise they're going to be there from, I believe, April to September, which explains the dates on the license. They have the ability to do private catered events. They also have a signed agreement with the airport for Nobody Beach parking. They just got approved last night with the land bank for Cisco Beach. I think they're going for an agreement with Cisco Brewery as well. So we have those agreements. Those conditions will be put on the license for those locations. Should they at any time look to add a location, we would need that agreement too as well. So this is currently what we have. It's a 6x10 trailer. And they have set up their application with Surfside Wastewater. So they have that. They will be parking overnight at the Boys and Girls Club lot as well. And we also updated some of the regulations to be on the license too, as well as where they should be parked. Again, we've added that if they are in the downtown parking district to do a private event of some kind and they're delivering food, that requires a street blocking permit from town. They can't just park it as a commercial vehicle in a timed spot. So we added that to take care of that information, but they can't serve out of a mobile food unit in that area as well. So.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
could I just ask a
Yep,
question of
sure.
Amy? So you said the applicant has a lease or agreement with the Boys and Girls Club.
Correct.
Is it within the Boys and Girls Club's permit, special permit, license, whatever, to provide that service to a third party? That's not one of their sponsored events?
No, it's a commercial kitchen, so Health went through the process. It is an approved commercial kitchen for that use. So he went through the whole 30-day process with Health Department and
So they
with
have
all that.
they have
the ability to do that.
They do
correct.
have the right to do that.
And they do it in the reason there's blackout dates is because they do rent it out for some special events on those dates. So on those dates, the mobile food unit cannot operate.
Is the applicant here? Anybody like to speak? Oh, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. I'm Devin Wright, co-founder of Nantucket. I think Amy did a really great job, I think, describing everything.
You lift up your mic. You're tall.
I don't have too much else to add. I mean, just except that we'll be, really supporting the local community. I mean, everything except the trailer will be local. Ingredients, our employees, and we plan to donate a portion of our profits to anything that we could do to help conserve. Like hearing all this about the erosion gives me ideas because we were thinking about donating to the land bank and any ocean conservation on the island. So maybe there's something we could do with that. We're all about local and supporting. These are pictures of a similar unit. That's not what ours will look like. Any other questions?
Yeah, any questions for applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Would anybody from the public like to speak on this? This is a public hearing. Okay, any other questions from the board? For anybody else? We'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes. That's 4-0 and Mr. Fee recused.
Okay, thanks. Am I done? Oh, I'm done.
I
We're
think you're
good?
done. Thank you,
Okay,
Amy.
thank you.
Don't be so excited. All right, Livia, town manager's report.
Okay, we've got our second quarter budget reports for fiscal 19 for the general fund, Our Island Home, and solid waste.
Whoa. Normally I look at these, but okay. That's okay. I can do it from the paper. Okay, I'll take the. Do you want to wait?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I wouldn't take it personally.
Okay. So, as in your packet, revenues were slightly down in the second quarter, mainly generally due to decrease of about $2 million in property tax collections for the second quarter. Overall, when you compare the 6-month periods, we are down about 3%. One of the things that we focus on mostly in terms of revenue, since property tax collections always do come in, is really on local estimated receipts. And local estimated receipts are running very close to budget and better than actuals last year. We actually are over what we collected at this point last year in rooms and meals tax, which is one of the key indicators. One of the big areas that we'll be focusing on in the next couple of weeks is the motor vehicle excise tax bill. That really will be another indication of how our year is going to end based on the billings that we send out. As I always explained, the third quarter of every fiscal year is when the largest motor vehicle excise tax bill goes out. But as you can see from this, we are still running about 17% ahead of last year. So we are on pace with local estimated receipts, which is primarily where our focus is when we're looking at how revenue is doing. So while we're overall down about 3%, it's not something that I'm really overly concerned about at this point, given the large local estimated receipts we know we'll be bringing in. So I think we still are on target to meet all of the revenue projections that we built the budget on. On the expenditure side, excuse me, in the last quarter, in the second quarter, we were up about 10%, primarily due to some contractual payments that we're obligated to pay under all of the contractual labor agreements we have. These payments are made in the second quarter of the fiscal year, so that was one of the reasons they're driving behind that. Overall, we're still running on target and are experiencing still the savings not only in the health insurance lines but in the debt service lines, as we've discussed before. So overall, general fund still looks to be on target to have another solid year at this point. As we begin to head around the corner into the third and fourth quarters, it is something that we work very closely now with department heads on pretty much a weekly basis, to confirm where they think they're going to end up to ensure that we don't face any unforeseen problems as we get closer to the end of the year. We did have a few can you scroll? Yeah, keep going. We are still in the wind down phase on some projects and the wind up phase on other projects. So right now, the fire station was the primary driver for our capital expenditures, road maintenance. The DPW has been doing a lot of work on sidewalks and road maintenance. And then we also had some vehicle purchases and some paving that was done. So those are primarily the largest projects for the 6-month period that we just ended. Go ahead. As you'll recall, in November of 2018, we issued short-term bond anticipation notes of $12 million. They funded various projects within the town, including enterprise funds, airport, sewer, and some town obligations, be it related to the current ongoing sidewalk projects and some other related infrastructure projects. We also issued $20 million worth of general obligation permanent financing, $17,349,000 for various town departments, including the fire station, Ireland Home, and the public schools. And then $3.1 million of that was also issued for permanent financing of the water company administration building. Keep going. The credit rating hasn't changed. Again, this is the Muni Watch, and as you know, as we always talk about, the yellows are really kind of just something that we do pay attention to. We don't ever want to see them flip to red if we can help that. And as I said, we do monitor these on pretty much on a weekly or every other week basis and discuss internally where we think they're headed. And right now, we still feel confident with where the revenue's at. And we do provide an investment report based on how the investments have gone. Primarily, this is made up of stabilization funds, scholarship funds, and OPEB. We did receive news this week, which we're going to have to begin working on very quickly, but Morgan Stanley, due to the extreme costs that they face from a legal basis for managing municipal investments, has decided to exit the market. Which came as a little bit of a shock. We had heard rumblings that they may be thinking about doing it. We were also then discussed it with the financial advisor, and he did not think that it was going to happen, but then we did receive the call. that they have decided to do that. And one of the primary reasons that they do that is because with the amount of municipal clients that they have, not only in Massachusetts but across the country, they have to certify that they're in compliance with every single investment policy. And there's a substantial amount of legal work and risk that they have decided is just not worth what they're getting in fees. So we have already reached out to a couple other firms. Bartholomew and Rockland Trust both have municipal investment divisions, and we will begin this process of figuring out how and what to do as we proceed. We actually still have some time, and because of the size of our investment with Morgan Stanley, we probably have a little bit more leeway than a majority of their clients, but it's something that we're going to have to address.
Is this because I was reading something today or yesterday about sort of municipal debt and taking on, too much debt countrywide, and this potentially being sort of a bubble that will implode in the next so many years. Do you think that they're just getting out before, are they the smart money getting out before the,
Well, I think that they're getting out simply because there's when things don't go as planned, they're the first ones that get sued by everyone. And there's a lot of risk in having to ascertain that if you have 130 municipal clients that you're in compliance with, because every single community does not have the same investment policy for these funds. And there's a lot of compliance work from a legal standpoint for them to have to deal with. So I think that that's and I don't think it's as lucrative of a business anymore for them as it used to be, which is why they're getting out of it. So we will be moving the money probably by the end of April to somewhere. Some of it will have to go through a competitive process. Some of it we could look to move to the state fund for the OPEB, or we can move that a little easier to one of the other investment firms or that do compete for municipal business on a regular basis. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All set? Yep. Okay, so for Q2 for our island home, fiscal year 19 year-to-date is running about 9% under budget in revenue. That's based on year-to-date booked revenue. However, Q2 itself is only 5% down. So we're definitely, since we opened those additional 4 beds and started growing our census back after the construction was done the end of fiscal 18, we're making progress. Every month there's more patient days build out and generating revenue. And at this pace, if we went from 13% deficit in Q1, only a 5% or 4% deficit in Q2, at that rate, we actually should catch up for revenue by the end of the year, assuming that the census continues to grow. It is growing slower than I would have hoped, but it is growing. Which is good. Every month we've had more revenue days booked for the year since July, so that's good. Medicare revenue's actually 9% higher than budget year to date. Medicaid revenue is 12% lower year to date. Private revenue is 11% lower year to date. But the Medicare and the private, that's where we're actually growing. Our private numbers are up over Q2 as opposed to Q1, which is good. That's a good thing. For the first 6 months of the year, we had activated 4 additional beds off of the 36 activated that we closed fiscal year 18 at. So we went to 40 available beds, and I actually submitted paperwork requesting to activate the remaining 5 beds. More so, I probably won't have to utilize them until into Q4, hopefully, but the state is looking differently at how they allow you to keep beds out of service for construction and or not. There's definite benefits to have them out if you're not utilizing them. However, they've kind of taken the stance that beds that are out of service that are not specifically down for any reason, they anticipate that you don't need them then. And moving forward into 2019, they're looking at if you have them out for so long, you're not going to get them back and you may lose them permanently. So I filed all the paperwork on the 26th just to get that in. I'm just waiting for their approval because of the change in the way they're looking at things. They're meeting to try to figure out how the process is going to go. So it's normally if you put in a request, it's back within a week or so, and it's pushing 10 days now. But I'm sure there won't probably be a problem with that. We'll activate it back to 45 and just sit on them, so they're there for our use when they're ready. Within the revenue for the fiscal 19 year to date, there were 771 fewer bill days than year to date 18. However, again, with the census growing, out of the 771 short from same time frame last year, only 121 we were short. So like 80% of the bill days short from the first 6 months of 18 came in the first quarter, and only 20% in the second quarter. So like I said, we're definitely increasing. Let's see. And again, the occupancy rates. For fiscal 19 year to date, it was average of 34 out of 40. However, for the second quarter, 35.6 out of 40. I actually rounded down to 35, but I know it's actually over the hump that I could have rounded up, but always be conservative, they say. Average reimbursement rates, Medicaid for quarter 2 fiscal 19 was $198.69, and 203 billable days for quarter 2 fiscal 18 was $207.31 and 2,200 bill days, respectively. Medicare rates for the quarter 2 fiscal 19, $439.43 and 330 billable days, whereas for quarter 2 fiscal 18 was $469.98, so roughly a $30 a day difference. However, only 133 billable days, so we're 200 billable days higher after the first 6 months of the year, which is great. For expenses, expenses year to date fiscal 19 are down 3% from the same time frame in 18. Total expenses are under budget both year to date fiscal 19 and quarter 2 fiscal 19, around 5%. So, you know, when you look at the overall operation, our revenue is increasing, and typically expenditures pretty much are stable across the board quarter to quarter. So with that being said, what's good is revenue's down 9%, expenses are down 5%, because expenses make up almost twice as much as revenue. We're actually pretty close with the revenue with the expense savings after the first 6 months to cover the revenue loss. So we're kind of on target where we need to be. And if the revenue keeps growing, we actually could turn the tables and by the end of the year be a little bit ahead, hopefully. And that's it. Questions?
I don't have any. No.
Thank you.
You bet.
Good evening. Rob McNeil, DPW. So for the first half, revenue for the first 6 months was relatively level compared to last year's actuals, representing about 44% of the overall annual budget. Landfill fees are up, which is representative of strong construction activity occurring. We've had relatively good weather, particularly through December, and so our numbers are really, again, strong compared to where we were last year at the same time. Total expenditures, excluding debt service, 19% lower, and representing the same 44% of the annual budget so far. MSW volumes were up 3.5% compared to the same time frame last year. C&D volumes up 7% since last year. So again, still continuing to see that same thing you see on the street. A lot of construction activity happening island-wide, and I think the better weather contributes to higher numbers, more work days out there.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Landfill fees are separate from C&D, or no?
Say again?
C&D and landfill fees are two separate
They are.
items?
Yes.
But the landfill is still related to construction?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. It was a pretty significant jump.
There's also we've seen a huge jump in, or let's say a steady increase in leaf and yard waste. Continuing to go up.
But we're not charging, right? Correct?
We're not charging.
Yet?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No.
But we're paying.
It's there's a lot of fee structures that are going to be looked at. You know, this whole system operates really on the premise that we want to take it all in. We don't want things to end up in the moors, for instance. It's far less about personal responsibility and what people ought to be doing. So, not to get off track, but as far as the finances go, we're on track and continue to look at the details and how we can improve the system overall.
Can I ask one more? The other one that jumped out a little bit were the professional services collection and disposal. What's that?
Professional services collection and disposal relates to the off-island tip fees.
Okay. For our recycling or our land? Or
No, generally it's for C&D.
Okay. And those prices, I'm guessing, have gone up as well, or is that just the increased volume?
No, those are expected to go even further up because our waste stream is changing. We're talking about diverting further the non-recyclable, non-compostable portions of our waste stream that are currently, that we're finding are in our compostable stream. So that's going to deviate some things that have been going through the composter that are being landfilled currently.
Okay.
Will be getting shifted off island into the C&D stream. And we expect that the commingling that into the C&D stream is going to raise the off-island tip fee.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, you got anything?
Thanks.
Rob.
Okay, just want to do a quick review of upcoming agenda items, and there's a couple of things that have changed since this went to you. Next week, we have a county meeting and a number of real estate matters on the town side. And there are some other items on the town side which are escaping me right this moment, but we went over the agenda today on them. February 6th, we are hoping the Affordable Housing Trust will have its report as to the reuse of the fire station property for affordable housing, as was discussed a few weeks ago. We'll have the second quarter of the fiscal 19 budget reports for the remaining departments. Hopefully, we will have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission at your meeting to adopt or approve the hazard mitigation plan update. This is something that a number of departments have been working on. And you will have actually, this has probably changed now, a potential recommendation from the Marijuana RFQ Committee for award of the RFQ for the retail medical marijuana co-located establishments. We met yesterday, and actually we're not meeting again until the 11th. And we are intending to ask for additional information to both proposers. We need a chance to get it to them. They need a chance to provide it. We need a chance to review it and evaluate it, and then get back to you. February 13th, there's not anything, there will be items scheduled, but not other than routine matters. There's nothing overly specific right now. February 20th, there are a couple of things that have come up. I think we will be getting a Green Communities presentation at that meeting, as well as we have a sewer district public hearing with regard to the sewer district articles that are on the warrant for the annual town meeting. And you have no meeting on February 27th. And there's a couple of pending items that are listed there.
Okay. Thank you, Libby. Okay, we're going to move on to the Select Board reports comments. First item is update regarding African Meeting House incident investigation. I wanted to put this on the agenda to give a report on what we, as much as we possibly could, talk about in public what we talked about in executive session. So the five of us and town manager met with police chief on January 17th. And I asked at the end of our executive session of everything that we could report back that didn't compromise the investigation. So if you bear with me, I'd like to read this. We have copies. It's in our agenda and our packet as well. But I'd like to read pretty much a summary of what we learned. And then I'll open it up if anybody in the public would like to speak and our board members. The police department expended well over 100 hours of investigative and patrol time related to the incident that was reported to the department on March 11, 2018. During the course of the investigation, officers knocked on 53 doors seeking information from nearby residents and talked to 42 persons that officers understood may have information about the incident. Out of those conversations, 7 resulted in formal interviews intended to determine if the party had any direct knowledge or involvement in the incident. Overall, there were 19 separate multi-page reports that documented the results of the neighborhood canvass, including names and addresses of those talked to, the interviews of persons believed to have knowledge of the crime or to be involved in some way, as well as the chain of custody documentation for photographs and physical evidence that was collected during the investigation. In addition, there were several requests filed for security videotapes that detectives believe may be helpful to the investigation, resulting in multiple days of video being collected by the department. The chief reviewed with the select board the relevant documentation that the department has on file in regard to the request made by Mr. Jim Barrows at the board meeting on December 11, 2018. The department has extensive assistance from our federal and state law enforcement partners in conducting this investigation. Detectives worked with a forensic interview specialist with the FBI out of Lakeville, Massachusetts, to review interviews of potential suspects in order to maximize the information that we were able to obtain during the interviews. The FBI has also been helpful with technical assistance concerning potential physical evidence. The department has also worked with the Assistant Attorney General from the AG's office in Boston to keep them updated on the status of the investigation as along with the Cape and Islands DA's office will be handling any potential prosecution. Resources, expertise, documentation, and experience are not lacking regarding this investigation. The investigation is still very much active and considered an open case. While we do not have any specific suspects at the time, we do believe that we have evidence to tie a person to the crime scene once we are able to identify who that suspect may be. The department is asking that anyone that has information regarding the case to call the department. Your tip can be made confidentially to investigate by calling 508-228-3626. So that was a review of what we reviewed on the 17th. And I want to give a chance to our board to make any comments.
Well, just for clarification,
Sure.
I was not available on the 17th. I wasn't at that meeting, which is fine.
Okay.
I was baking bread.
I just want to clarify as well, because the questions that have come up for me from the public have mostly been related to, is there any new evidence? And I think there was a concern that this board was being asked to make some sort of criminal determination, and that really wasn't that's not within our scope at all. But this meeting was really about understanding the process the police have been going through and the status of the ongoing investigation, as well as the resources that have been made available to us well above and beyond what we have here on island. So.
I think in December when Mr. Barrows asked the board, what are you doing? It really made me think of, well, what can we do? What are we doing? And so this is why I asked to have this executive session so we can understand as much as possible. So when we do get questions from the public, we can have something in return. So be happy to take public comment.
Jim Barrows. You know, your silence discloses your guilt and lack of leadership here. Had I not come in and asked a question to you people, right? Would we be here today at this point? January 21st, Martin Luther King, right? Great African American. There was a celebration at the Summer Street Church. Not one person on this board was there.
I was there.
I didn't see you.
I saw you.
Oh, you might have been in the kitchen.
No, I was there.
Okay. Yeah. We have some, I'm Cape Verdean. You know, my people built this island, just about quite a bit of it, you know? And we come from, you know, we got big hearts. You know, you come to my house, I go to your house. You know, no such thing as color, you know? And this has been dragging for a long time, you know? And, you know, it's, you know, shame on you guys. Shame on you guys, you know, for not going a little bit more further. Because there's some names circulating around this island, you know, of individuals, you know, you know. And, you know, the last time I was here, the following day, Detective Willow, I believe, from the police department called me if he could meet with me. I said, no problem. Right after the holidays, we'll meet at my uncle's house over in Marion, Mass. William DeCamo, civil rights activist, federal. He has questions, I have questions, and my attorney will be there. I've yet to get a call back. I got a call from the state police. Right? I responded, we'll meet. Nothing come back. There's something wrong with this picture, you know, but it's going to get solved. It's going to get solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like the public to speak?
Can I just say that I have continually asked what the status was of this, just because I don't say it here every week, that it's an appalling thing that happened. And one of the reasons it's an appalling thing that happened, and it's not been forgotten. I ask consistently what the status is. But one of the reasons we met in executive session was because then we could hear names and so further details of the investigation that just can't be public. And I am satisfied that the police department has done a very significant amount of work on this. And I think that they're continuing to.
Thank you, Don.
I'd like to start by saying, first of all, I'm Charity Grace Moffson. Not speaking on behalf of the Museum of African American History. I am speaking as a member of the community. I realize some folks have been ready to stop talking about the African Meeting House. It's uncomfortable. I get it. Trust me. But that's how we got here. We refuse to talk about the things that were uncomfortable. We refuse to acknowledge the hate being spewed from our friends and relatives' mouths. We failed to see it growing in our neighborhood. We pointed fingers at others, like off-island construction workers, when bad things happened. We didn't think it was our job. I'm grateful for the hard work that's gone into resolving the case. But we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the desecration of our historic African Meeting House, and that's unacceptable. We as a community have to do better. Someone knows who did this, whether it was you personally or you're aware of the culprit, you need to do the right thing and speak up. I'm hopeful that our community will be given the opportunity to truly heal and grow. I'm hopeful that the individuals who did this will have the opportunity to face real consequences, learn from their actions, and grow. I'm hopeful that more and more of us are taking the time to read books like So You Want to Talk About Race and Waking Up White. I'm hopeful that just because we got a handful of folks quoted in the Inky saying there's no racism on Nantucket, that we have our eyes and hearts open to believe our neighbors of color when they say they experience it firsthand. It's important that we talk to our neighbors who maybe don't look like we do. Listen to them when they say they live in discomfort. We have to learn to expand the circle of people we care about to include every single member of our community, and not just in word, but through our actions. Be willing to do the hard work of unpacking the prejudices you've been conditioned to have. The conditioning wasn't your fault, but continuing in ignorance is. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Thank you. Anybody else in the public like to speak? Sure.
Steve Bender, 73 Orange Street. What I would like to do is bring up publicly some of the rumors that are running around the island.
I don't know if that's appropriate for right now.
Well, you may not think it's appropriate, but
Well,
this
the
is the
rumors.
third time I have read this generic update. Okay? And I will make a comment on the update. Eliminating the prime suspects at the beginning of the investigation on the basis of questionable alibis led to the expended time and all the other obvious investigative endeavors, which I am quite sure will go on. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had one comment. I've been thinking a lot about this last couple months, and I was at the Summer Street Church, and I was lucky enough to hear Charity read Dr. Martin Luther King's letter when he was in Letters to Birmingham when he was in jail, and I went back afterwards and I read it again, and he talks about the Great White Moderate, and if we don't do something like that's the worst if we don't continue the conversation. So as I'm thinking about this, Saturday night at the Box was a great example of how this island comes together. And it was one of the things that drew me here back in 1999, because the small town I come from doesn't do that. Nantucket really does take care of their own. And I thought it takes care of their own when there's a face to it, when we know the person. But if it's mental health transportation, it's not our problem. If it's racism, an off-islander did it. It's not our problem. And so I think this conversation needs to continue, even at this level. You asked a long time ago, Rita, what's our leadership role in this on the board? I think we should be doing more. And I don't really know what we can do leadership, whether it's acting a task force for diversity or leading the cause or putting resources towards it. But I think the scariest thing would be if we found out who did it tomorrow, which would be good and help us heal, have some closure. But then if we stop talking about it, would be sad. So I want us to continue to have this conversation. I'm not really sure what my role in that would be. I'd be happy to help. But when I hear things like it's not my problem with mental health transports, and it's not us here, I think it is us. I think it's me. I think it's everybody in this room. You know, this is us. So just kind of some of my thoughts on this. Thank you, Jim.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but people are criticizing this board. But look at this board. We don't reflect the ethnic and cultural and racial diversity of this community. So we're all white people, and if so I'd encourage people of color, people from the Hispanic community, run for selectman. Come sit up here and be part of that decision. Be part of the sitting at the table when we, as five people, define the strategic direction of this community, and use those words and take those positions on the very things you're passionate about, because this is the bully pulpit for you to do that.
I'd just like to add that that was something that really struck me after some of the events at the conference that we went to over this weekend, where we have on this board age diversity, we have gender diversity, but we don't have ethnic cultural diversity. And you're right, it does not represent the fabric of the community or the history of the community at all. While I think that, I think it's too easy to say people should get up and say, it was difficult enough for me as a white woman to run. I think we've got to figure out how to increase engagement. We had one person, I remember this year, apply for committee and commission who represented, I think, the Brazilian community. And he didn't make it on. What did we do to pursue helping him contribute? That really gutted me that we didn't show the support here. So I think that, while it's easy to say people should be coming to us, I think we have to figure out how to make our administration, our government, more accessible to the entire community.
I did go to a seminar on that subject.
Excellent.
That I can touch on next week a bit.
And we got snookered and blew that appointment, but that's a different issue.
We did, and that was one specific one. But again, we can't do it every time, but I think we have to be, the leadership isn't waiting for people to come to us. To me, it's finding out how to make ourselves more accessible.
I mean, regardless of that, though, we are the people here right now, and it's important for us to keep all of these sort of community awareness and community health conversations in the realm of what we talk about besides liquor licenses and budgets. I think that that's just something that we should be engaging in more, finding the time for more. And raising kids here compared to myself growing up here, I mean, it is amazing the diversity that my children experience and how little they really recognize it at this stage. I find that encouraging.
Brooke?
Hi, I'm Brooke Moore, and I've thought a lot about this. I'm friends with Charity Grace, and she and I have talked about it. And I think there's two things here. There's a police investigation as to who did this crime, and then there's how is it possible that this crime happened in our community. And I don't think the failure of the police to find the culprit is the thing we should be hanging our hat on. I think we should be hanging our hat on the why of this as a community, and we should be engaging professionals to bring this community conversation to the fore. And I think this board could provide leadership in that, whether it is some kind of conference where we bring in someone from outside our community to encourage us, to provoke us to bring this topic up, and not just live every day with the status quo. I see that we're a very diverse community, but we're not a very integrated community, and that makes me sad. And I think we could make a lot more effort in welcoming people who don't look like us to this community and making sure we're having this conversation about how the hell this happened in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. There are comments from the public? Mr. Bitter?
I'd like to make another comment. I think the woman who just spoke said something very important. I'd like to say that the racial makeup of the Selectmen's Board is trivial. We had Augie Ramos as selectman a number of years ago, who was railroaded out of it. We had Frank Spriggs, who was selectman in the early 2000s. So that is not really a problem.
Thank you.
When I came to this island, I had come from New York City. I came 50 years ago. I came from various towns in Massachusetts. And I was amazed when I came here at what I thought was the racial calmness of Nantucket compared to any other place I had been in. I really admired it. Some of my earliest friends, they also befriended me, were Cape Verdeans. And I had dinner at their houses. They had dinner at my house. We drank together. I said, this community is really something. I enjoyed it on this level more than I enjoyed the previous 36 years of my life as far as racial relations go. The past number of months, this has changed. This community has been rent by this graffiti on the African Meeting House on March 12th. And I believe, in fact, I mentioned the suspects weren't looked into. Ask any high school student in this town, and they will tell you who the prime suspects are. This has been ignored. Of course, it's been legally ignored. Legally ignoring this is called a cover-up, and that's what we're facing. Thank you.
Any other comments? Roberto?
Roberto Santamaria. I'm here as a resident of 30 Acres Lane and also speaking from the opposite side as a minority working for the town. And to believe that any member of the people working for this town would be actively trying to cover up is really wrong. And it is irresponsible. And it takes away from the work that the people I work with every day. It takes away from the work of our police department to provide an impartial investigation. Yes, we have a pretty white community. Yes, this is a pretty racist state. Coming from the South, Massachusetts is perhaps the most uncomfortable place I've ever lived in. However, the people I work with here, the people who are represented at this table, have perhaps been some of the most impartial, equitable, and fair people I've ever worked with in my career. And it is extremely unfair to say that you don't care, because I work with you. I know you do. And the police department, they're doing everything they can. They're not covering anything up. I had to say that to protect and defend you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. Any other comment? The public? Board? Okay. Thank you all. Next up is a review of R Island Home architectural proposals. Is that, Rachel, you leading that? Libby? Don? Tucker? You stood up.
I guess
Tucker.
I'll try to lead it. So I apologize. I was not at, excuse me, I was not at the meeting where this came up as part of your discussion based on another item that you wanted kind of a status update of where we were with the funding that was appropriated, which was the $1 million, to look at renovating or designing a new facility, where that funding had gone and what stage we're at right now with architectural proposals for the existing site. So what you see in front of you now is a breakdown of the, sorry, the $1 million that was appropriated at the 2015 annual town meeting. We have spent approximately half of that thus far, and that is the breakdown as you see it. One correction that I do have is where the Wampanoag Tribal review of the current site, that actually was a subset of the PAL archaeological study from Sherburne and the Howard site. I actually tried to do a little bit of digging to understand what was actually done with a tribal archaeological review on the current site, and found that where we had left that was SMRT, the architects that we had engaged, had recommended that even though there's not further disruption that needs to be done, it still needs to have a quick review, but that was never engaged. So that was my error on that one spending, that all related to the Sherburne and Howard property. Most of where we have been in about March of 2017, prior to the town meeting, SMRT had made a recommendation based on the current site that there were two options that you could possibly do. And that's kind of what has led us to where we are right now. As you know, that vote for that town meeting was turned down. And so we kind of had to look back at the current site. So if you, do you have any questions on the current spending before I? Okay. So this is a brief summary and cost of the 3 architectural firms who's responded. And ultimately what we charged them with ended up relating back to what SMRT kind of summarizes was our 2 options. Looking at the current site, what can be done, what are our restrictions, what is the surrounding property, what does it look like, what are any hazards or other type of waterfront concerns. Would it be phased construction? Would it be 2-story? And an alternate option, which was one of SMRT's recommendations as well, is how and does that impact Landmark in any way? Landmark is on a parcel owned by the town, but the building itself is actually under control by two different nonprofits, and they receive heavily federal and HUD funding. So there's a lot of negotiations that would have to go underway with that. I think my understanding of the discussions that we've had is anything to least impact that and use that as an option is preferred. But we are understanding where we heard a lot of feedback from taxpayers and what their concerns were, and we're never really taking anything off the table, which is why that has been a discussion. And I have had a few very preliminary discussions with Ella so that it wasn't a surprise to her if she heard that Landmark was being discussed. So these were three that were responded. We received these architectural names. There was actually a total of 4. One was non-responsive at all, through Clifton Larson Allen, we are currently engaged in the financial analysis of our current operations. They do a lot with different groups. They do a lot with determination of needs, and they recommended these 3 were the responders. Based on their current work that they have been doing. All of them are familiar with long-term care. All of them are familiar with phase designing, which ultimately means that you keep all, if not a portion, of your operations functioning while you're looking at renovating or building a new site around the existing, which it seems like that might be the method that we really dive into at this stage. There is a big price discrepancy. All of these were looked at by an informal work group. So we did have the former chair, Dave Fredericks of the building committee that was part of that, a member of FinCom, a member of the capital committee. We had a member of the select board as well, who were all kind of having some of these discussions and looking at what the scope would be. And they all also vetted these as well. What we understood was that the recommendation is to go with LWDA through that informal work group. It is the most comprehensive. It seemed like they took the scope and the basis of that scope and had the most comprehensive plan of how to address that. It doesn't necessarily mean that the others didn't make the attempt. It's just their proposal that they provided was in much more depth of understanding that we would get more and have a great base to use to try and make a decision moving forward and to bring to taxpayers and to bring to the community and see how they wanted to take that information and move forward. One thing that is not on here, I had tried to do it. I did work with Erica Mooney as well by looking at these proposals to try to do this, to figure out as an alternate option with the Landmark, if we took that out completely from the beginning, how does that change these numbers? Thankfully, I am very unfamiliar sometimes on how to read these type of proposals, but thankfully it took them a good day to get back to me as well because they had to do some digging on their end. The Dunlap Associates, would be $103,610. LWDA would be $184,000. And Somides would be $73,000. So their numbers and their proposal doesn't decrease all that much based on removing Landmark as a potential option. The remainder of the information in your packet is the beginning portion of each of those 3 proposals. It is not the entire response that we received. They were many, many pages, but most of it had to do with prior projects, information, references, and the profiles of the individuals involved. So I took those out just in essence of being able to scan size-wise and give you the meat of the proposals. But the full proposals are very much available for you if you need them. And also in your packet was a list of the scope that was provided to each of these groups to show what we were kind of asking them to do. And most of it is a preliminary site assessment. So for everybody's knowledge, this was not a formal RFP. Based on how we were looking at getting the information, we wanted a more high-level preliminary understanding so that we could then make a decision to issue an RFP to move forward. I think where we kind of got snagged the first round was we did a formal RFP that had multiple phases, And we kept getting, before we could move to phase 2, we kind of kept getting thrown back at phase 1. So this ultimately is trying to get the preliminary information down at what truly can we do in only focusing on the current site, while before we were also focusing on multiple sites at the same time. So I don't know if you have any questions, but I think that's, do you have anything to add, Brett?
No, the only other thing that I think is when you look at the
You can go to the microphone.
Oh yeah, sure.
People listen on the radio and TV.
So usually I don't have a problem reaching everybody without it, but so the only other thing that I think is worth mentioning, that though all 3 architects are well versed in the industry and phase construction in Massachusetts and other states also, seemingly the one that the work group kind of wants to go with, LDWA, also has more experience on non-nursing home projects, but on Nantucket. So as they go through some of the things, I think they'll probably be more astute at what they need to put together for the different studies and things like that.
So I brought this question up, and I appreciate you and Libby bringing back and Don bringing back this for just a conversation. It's hard to without looking at the minutes, but my recollection, as I said before, the scope of the project was on the current site, which is the 2.57 acres, and while we had a conversation about Landmark House, it was pretty quickly, I thought, kind of taken off the table. So I in no way want to second guess what the group's doing. If you want to include the Landmark House, that's fine. I just think that this board needs to endorse that, because I personally see it as a change in scope, and I certainly appreciate that. I would certainly support that, but I just want the community to know that the Landmark House would be within the scope of study.
Thank you, Jim.
I do think at this stage, based on our discussions, we were trying to take that back off the table. So, okay. I mean, I understand, and it was part of the alternate option, right, because, like I said before, we don't want to get wrapped up in anybody from the community at all feeling that we were making a decision or taking anything off the table without that being vetted, which is why we left it in the original scope, so that if there was an option on just the current parcel of land that only is occupied by the Ireland home, if for some reason anybody came forward in a public forum or public comment and said, well, what about the remaining portion of the front area? Why aren't you looking at that? We do still have that as part of the original scope that we could dive into that deeper. So again, we didn't really want to take anything off the table, but I do think that our information and that we've been talking and my understanding of how Landmark operates and the negotiations that would have to take place, we don't really want to engage that as an option if we don't have to, based on just the overall complexity of it. It would also add a huge amount of capital.
Before you engaged in that?
I'm sorry?
Would you come back to this board before you
absolutely.
Before you kind of went through that exercise of engaging the Landmark House?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't
because I think
believe-
it should be transparent to the community.
Yeah. And I think if we ever got to a point where what was happening on the current site and current parcel only was to the point that we couldn't just do it and we needed to start doing that, that's when we would come back and we would probably have to expand further from there. But I think that, again, I just don't think that we wanted to take any option off the table without it being discussed.
Dawn?
I would like to see us move forward with a full analysis of doing it on the existing site, and taking the Landmark House out of it, but leaving the option to add it back in if we're really sort of unhappy with the direction it's taking. But I would like to, leave in the possibility of negotiating something with Landmark House to use the vacant land area, whether it's for parking relocations or temporary parking or staging.
Yeah, I'm sure that during the actual construction or
without
anything,
actually touching their building.
Yeah, I'm sure during that phase they would be more than willing to have those type of negotiations with us. And the conversation I've had with all the architects and asking for them to break out that option clearly, because the proposals weren't necessarily that clear, was they understand that we were using that as a if need be, we might have to look at this, but we're really not trying to do that as the preliminary.
I feel like it waters it down a little bit to not keep it sort of in one box.
Can I just ask once we award the contract, do we have a rough timeline of how long it will take to go through this whole process?
We had hoped to try to have a contract awarded mid-January, and they were basing on that timeline, and everybody kind of came back with a May. And I think what they were looking at doing is trying to really go gung-ho with this, get their engineers on site, get the meetings going, and then right after town meeting, because they assumed everybody would be wrapped with that anyways, then you could start the discussions with the public and anything like that in May. So I mean, obviously that's pushed back a little bit now because we haven't awarded a contract. So I think that they're still moving in that, 5 to 6 month range is what all the timelines we received back were.
Okay, great.
I also thought that the budget was pretty bare. I thought, I mean, if you can get the richness of that proposal for that amount of money, you'll be doing well. And I hope you have the ability to, without making it too burdensome, to add some dollars. Because, we went through this before. We found a bunch of stuff that were like, oh, we got to look at that. Yep. So, and they're all things we hadn't done before, looked at. So right. I hope you have, I'm sure you do, but I hope you have some leeway to add some additional dollars if you need to.
Yeah, I agree with hiring LWDA. I think of the three that were in here, they were the most sort of responsive and understanding. You just read and understand that they know what they're talking about for here. I particularly like that they mentioned sea level rise and that sort of, and engineering for that, if it's possible. Yep. We had the resiliency a couple weeks ago, and the maps are frightening. 2 feet of rise, and then the storm surge does a lot of damage downtown, does a lot of damage in that area. Mm-hmm. So we either have to build for it or move away from it. And I think hopefully, this will not be a political argument about whether it's, hopefully they'll look at it solely from what's going to happen over the next 50 to 100 years when we have 2 feet of sea level rise and X amount of storm surge. I think we have to take the emotions out of it and do the right thing. If we're going to continue in this business, then we need to make sure we're doing it in the right place. And so, I was happy to see that they're going to do that.
Yep.
So.
Any other comments, questions? Okay.
So I guess I'll take that as you are okay with the recommendation to move forward with. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, next up is discussion regarding board position on condominiums and Surfside Crossing 40B application. This is something that Matt and I had been talking about. He wanted to get a little more clarity from the board.
Yeah, we made a vote about a month ago, and the vote that I thought we took was to, was against the density and against the condo forms, and they were the large buildings. And I thought we had taken that vote, and it was clear. And then I watched some of the ZBA tapes, and it was kind of, it sort of sounded, like, well, any affordable housing is good. The board supports any affordable housing. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I thought we just voted not to support it in that form. So I reached out to Tucker and I said, hey, Tucker, gee whiz, we didn't do that. And he said, well, I think you did. It's unclear. So I said, okay, well, we'll clarify it. So we're back here, hopefully, to clarify it. I think, under the guise of affordable housing, you can make some pretty awful mistakes. And, just because we want to get affordable housing, there's certain places we shouldn't be putting, tall buildings and big buildings and density. And I think, almost a mile away from the Stop and Shop is one of those areas we shouldn't be putting it. And I think that we should speak, very clearly to the public and, to the process that's, sort of not in the best interest of the island. And I thought that's what we did. So I'm hoping that, that people will support that.
I would support it. That was, when I think back to that vote, I definitely, and this might be where I would disagree or debate a bit with maybe Tucker, but I don't support affordable housing at all costs when it's being driven by the motivators in a scenario like this, and where condos to me just are not appropriate there at all. So I would be supportive of clarifying that.
I just have to clarify something about condos. Condos are a form of ownership. Monomoy Village is condominiums. Park Circle is condominiums. I just take a real you're talking about size of building
Yes.
and density,
Yes.
which I think we've consistently had concerns with the density in this project and large scale buildings. But we cannot say condominiums because that is only a form of ownership.
And I think it's a great form of ownership because it lets you get into ownership without having to buy fee simple land and actually have ownership in something that might otherwise just be a rental property. So I'm glad, I mean, if we can take that, I mean, I voted against it as a project with a bunch of concerns about it, but it wasn't specifically because I didn't like the condominium form of ownership.
Can we clarify? Is it this? Hang on. Is it the? I'm using condos to describe. So we're talking about two different things. I don't mind the ownership. I'm describing the large buildings with 12 or 18 units in them. I think that those are inappropriate for that area. And so that's the part that that's what I'm adamantly against. If it were 60 units and 10 of them were duplexes in condominium ownership or some other ownership, who cares? But it's what it looks like and feels like and acts like on the ground there is what's important. And and it's how many cars are going to be in those bedrooms and in that site and everything. Those big buildings with rung by a parking lot, that was an abomination in my mind for that entire area. And that's the part that I'm trying to address.
So it's the massing of the building.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
if there's another way to say that, great.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to talk about not trading everything off for more 5-bedroom vacation homes.
Yeah.
Because I think that there could still be a mix of what's been offered in terms of actual things that would be accessible to year-round people, but they could be in duplexes, maybe triplexes, something that would be much smaller scale and tucked away from different things would not be objectionable.
Yeah, but
I come from the design perspective, being on HDC for 12 years, that you're not talking about the ownership, you're talking about the size of the building.
Right.
That looks like it belongs somewhere much more urban.
Right, and I think what was happening, unfortunately, is I think the impression was that we, as a board, were somewhat supportive of those large buildings because, gee whiz, they're affordable housing. It'll be great. We're going to get some housing. That was the impression that was being given somewhat at some of the ZBA meetings, and I think that that's wrong. So that's why we're here.
But we were pretty clear we didn't like the project. We all voted against it. I'm trying to understand what the I don't know where the issue is.
The use
here.
of the term condominium. Thank you for clarifying, Don. That I'm speaking along the same lines as Matt in the buildings themselves, not the condominium model of ownership.
Can I ask Mr. Pucci just give us an update on, because we obviously were here, not at the ZBA meeting, on what is going on with the design and something may or may not come out of that?
So tonight's public hearing was pretty much limited to talking about the parameters. There's going to be a design workshop where the chair has set out some designees to engage in a workshop with the developer to talk about site plan issues and possibly come up with another design, hopefully to satisfy the issues and concerns that have been raised by the ZBA during the process, and also, public comment on the process. So, hopefully as a result of that process, you'll see a substantial revision to the current design of the project. But that's, just me being an optimist. But you could be, hopefully facing a possible design that would be more acceptable to the type of design that you may be thinking about. So in February, there are going to be 2 of these workshop meetings. In fact, the ZBA designated that they're inviting a select board member to take part in that. And the way the workshop would take place would be designees would participate in that. So right now it would be 2 members of the ZBA, the developer, 2 members of the public from Tipping Point who have shown up at the public hearings, 2 non-affiliated project opponents. And then Ed Marchand, the town's 40B consultant, and a peer review architectural consultant who's been engaged by the board under the consultant review process to look at, architectural design issues for that site. So there are two, those will be, so the way that'll be set up is the designees will have the right to talk and participate in this workshop. The public can attend, but any further public comment would be limited to then in the further public hearings. If something comes up that somebody had a burning desire to talk about and they didn't get a chance to speak. So it's been contemplated that there will be 2 design workshops in February, and then the public hearing session will be continued into March. As of right now, the developer has agreed to an extension of March 15 to close the public hearing. There was quite a bit of discussion tonight about that. That's really not a reasonable extension at this point. It should really be at least into April. So they, committed to see how this design workshop process goes, and then further extensions would be considered as needed or not.
Okay.
So that's the status.
All right. Is it possible that something that these condos, what we're referring to, could look different when outside of this or after this design
It is
workshop
possible.
or not?
Yeah, I should say, it's not any mystery that the ZBA has been the project opponents have been very clear about, issues that they have with this project as proposed. But the ZBA also, during the public hearings, has really expressed real concern about the way this project is designed with these large buildings sort of in one part of the site, parking, and then, other single-family houses so tightly plopped onto that site. So, this has been a real concern that the board has presented from the get-go, including the proposed clubhouse, very large proposed clubhouse to go with these, large structures. So that has been very much, topic of ongoing discussion during the hearings. It's been a real concern of the ZBA.
Thank you.
I think the design review is really excellent. I mean, when I was on the HDC, most of the 40B projects came before our board in some kind of an informal review, and we made significant recommendations. I think the last one was actually Sachem's Path, where we essentially reviewed every house in there and made recommendations to the ZBA.
Yeah, the
So
ZBA
I'm surprised this has actually come so late.
Yeah, the ZBA has previously had referred them to HDC. As you know, the ZBA will sit in the shoes of the HDC for this process, but the developer has been asked to go before HDC so that HDC could comment to the board, so that they would be able to, get their input on it. And one thing on the design review process, a designee of the HDC will be invited to attend as a designee as well.
Thank you. Before we take public comment, do we want to try to kind of reframe this some way on what we're talking about? Do we want consensus?
Well, I'd like to say that we don't support large buildings surrounded by parking lots, and just make it, take the condo word out, and I'll make a motion that we don't support. We should back up the ZBA if they're concerned, and I think we should say we don't support large buildings surrounded by parking lots.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
But that is, but by leaving it out, that doesn't mean we like the rest of the project, because there's a lot of other
We
stuff.
already voted we don't like the density. That's
Right. Okay. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, I think for me that was a clarification on the prior.
On a prior vote. This is a clarification of prior vote, because I think we were,
I just had to bring up the technical definition of condos.
Well, I think you were right. That may
they
have been
can be
leading.
totally different. Most of our covenant homes were condos.
Yeah.
The old hospital is 6 condos.
And I think, that's the kind of thing can lead to that miscommunication as well. So
I
thank
could
you.
have called it an apartment building, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Pat?
Yeah, Patrick Tate. I've been to each of the ZBA meetings, and the ZBA has not yet gotten behind these large buildings, and you can call them condo buildings per plan, because on their plan, these large buildings, they are referring to as the condominiums. So I don't think you have to strike the word condominium. But again, I would ask you to support the ZBA, hold true to your course that we do not approve these buildings, and they have not endorsed them in any way. And at the last meeting, Ed Toole mentioned in open discussion about directions to go, that they should think about, and George can verify this, he was there, that maybe they should think about breaking up those large condominium buildings and creating more of a duplex style, which I don't think anyone would be opposed to, and they could still be their condominiums, but in smaller packages instead of very large packages. And then the only other thing I can say to keep in mind is I first came to Nantucket in 1977, and sorry if I step on you here, but in Matticat, we all know what Tristram's Landing is. And I've just known from the day I got here that we formed the HDC after a developer built these rather large buildings in Matticat so that it wouldn't happen again. And I think pretty much everyone that lives here in Nantucket is really opposed to that style. And it's extremely inappropriate to put in a residential neighborhood. If there is an appropriate place on the island, I don't know where it would be, the center of town maybe, but certainly not in a residential neighborhood. So I would just ask you to support the ZBA and continue with, no, we do not want to see these buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Megan Perry. I pretty much would like to say everything that he just said. I think that's perfect. Also, I think the reason we're calling them condos is because that's what the developers are calling them. It's for no other reason than we could call them Building 65 if that's what they called it on there. So I don't think we're trying to debate an affordability or how to home ownership, or we're just calling them what the developers call them. And I do think it's important that the ZBA hear from this board very definitively that you're not in favor of condos, large, dense building, whatever you want to call them. I think it's important that they hear that back up from you guys. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Looked like you had something to say, John.
I kind of always do. Joan Stockman. Gotta lift that a little bit. I would love it if the select board would support the ZBA. The ZBA has been so clear all along. I've been to every one of the ZBA meetings except one. They have been consistent in saying you need to break these buildings down. And what are they all doing at one end of the property? And the developer has continued to bring back plans that show monstrously large buildings that happen to be condos. Plus, it's not even kind of like a clubhouse. It's an enormous rec center, and it has a bowling alley, and it has a commercial kitchen, and it has all this stuff that would help them sell their units, but it wouldn't serve the island of Nantucket. It certainly doesn't serve the community. And one of the huge concerns that I have as an abutter is when I read in the ZBA packet what developers Posner and Feely have said about, yeah, we did consider, we looked at kind of downsizing the condos, duplex, triplex, whatever, and kind of mixing them around the development, but they said in writing, which I can't even believe, that they won't do that because of the impact of the market value of the cottages around them, so that it would devalue the adjacent houses. Guess who lives in an adjacent house? And so I can't imagine how the ZBA or anybody could support that kind of density. And it's the number of units, but it is the bedrooms per acre. And that's how we started when we were doing all of this research that we've done. That's how we started looking at it. And the South Shore Road community in general, which has got 1 acre, it's got whatever, it's got Abram Quarry, that is 3 bedrooms per acre. If you look at Sacham's Path, that is 10 bedrooms. If you look at the density of these massive condo buildings that they want to do, it is something like 34, 35 bedrooms per acre. And, it's profound amounts of impervious surface. I really appreciate your mentioning the parking that goes all around the buildings. It's kind of American shopping mall style. And it's a lot about making, selling the units for the developers. And I feel like we ought to always keep that in the forefront, that it's not, people talk about it as if it's about affordable housing, and it's not. It's about profit. So thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Any other comments? Okay. Anything else from the board? We're good. We're good?
So do you want us to prepare a letter? Or
I don't think so unless the board feels that.
I don't think so.
convey the vote?
Well, does there need to be something, if there's been a misunderstanding here, do we need to make sure that the ZBA knows that we had this discussion, that we're clarifying that?
I just asked George, have you heard anybody representing that this board's in favor of that project at all in any way, shape, or form?
Not really, but I'm only at the public hearings and
I'd say that public hearings.
not really.
Okay.
But if it's up to you. It could be expressed in a letter, an email.
Yeah, we can do it in a letter or email, summarizing with the board.
Could be summed up also when you take part, if you have a designee at the workshop. But however, it's totally up to you how you want.
I mean, if we're going to send a letter, go to that trouble, I think we should be a little stronger. And rather than saying we don't like large buildings, I think we should, reiterate our vote whenever we took that, clarify it that we're talking about the massing too, and that we support the actions of the ZBA, and we've funded a lot of their work, and if they will, call on us for other things they need.
I think I don't know how we could be more supportive of the ZBA. Of all the, extra reviews on peer reviews, and every letter has been kind of against the project and for the ZBA. I think we can send an email or letter summarizing what we talked about tonight.
Yeah, I think a letter wouldn't hurt. If there's any misunderstanding at all, this will clear it up.
Megan?
I was just to say a letter can't hurt because there does seem to be a little bit of misunderstanding, even just in the media, which I know sometimes is not an accurate source of news, but it can't hurt to send a letter just saying what you guys all said tonight. Thank you.
Don?
And will we do the designation next week's agenda? We probably need to put it on as an agenda item, right?
Can town manager just designate someone? Or does that have to be on the agenda? Or can somebody here say?
I don't know.
Do you want to do it? I mean, or does it have to be an agenda item?
How about if we ask if Dawn does it now? Since she brought it up.
You did bring it up.
But you've been on the HTC.
That's fine.
No, but you've been on the HTC.
I would
and
be happy
I
to
think,
do it. I'm familiar with
No. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Don, for your service.
So I get to call and harass you now?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, we're going to move on to adoption of 2019 annual town meeting and or election warrant.
So we're trying to get it final, and there are some things that have happened since your last meeting, and you got, I think, a draft as of this afternoon, and there's still even more stuff that's changed a bit. So I wanted to point out what's new since last week. And we've talked about this. The standalone debt exclusion articles and ballot questions are in that are included in the Capital Program Committee's report. We need to make a few minor wording clarifications, but that's not substantive. The local support article that we talked about last week for Milestone Rotary is in, and I wanted to call to your attention, I think I emailed this to you earlier in the week, that it's not just the Rotary, it's also improvements to Milestone Road itself, specifically widening it from the Rotary to Bunker Road.
And I may have missed that meeting, but I don't recall that the widening of Milestone Road was part of this project.
Well, that's why I'm mentioning it now.
No, I know, but I mean, it must have been vetted. We've done a lot of vetting of the Milestone Rotary. So have we? I mean, I assume we've been doing the same vetting somewhere about the widening of the road.
It was discussed. It was in NBDC. It was in the
Okay.
transportation stuff half a year ago. It's been there for a while.
Yeah, I just didn't
Okay.
include it last week.
Right, and it's
And
state
it's,
fund.
it's up to New South. Bunker
state
Road,
funded.
yeah.
It's New South. I drove out to, I couldn't find Bunker Road. I found
It's
New
called New
South.
South Road, yeah.
It's 2.6 miles. But as we, I'm just reflecting on our history about getting these kinds of things passed at town meeting, I think we have to be real transparent and talk about this part of the project too.
And if you drive, as you're driving out, take a look at the shoulders, and you can see where the trucks
Yeah.
and the stuff have
Yeah.
broken the shoulders all the way out. It's something needs to be done. So
And is it going to be on the right side as you're driving? As you're driving towards Sconset, what side of the road is the widening going to?
They might do both. They
I'm
might
gonna
just
guess
do one
both,
side,
but I don't know.
and move it over.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I think we need to know that too.
I think
Amber,
it
do you
says
know?
it there. It's going to include 2 11-foot wide travel lanes and 2 1-foot wide shoulders to increase the safety. So to me, that reads
It's gotta-
both sides are
both
widening.
sides,
Yeah, when it rains heavily, it's very challenging on that road.
Yep. Sunday was terrible.
And I mean, let's not forget, this has passed town meeting already. The last town meeting, there wasn't a quorum. It just has, there
Right
have
at the
been
ballot.
problems at the ballot. And I continue to think that it has a lot to do with the way it's worded.
But this isn't a ballot question. There's no ballot
Right,
question
because it's
for
not
this.
because it's not debt.
So it hasn't
that's why
passed.
it's good
It
to
hasn't
split it
passed
up.
town meeting.
It was part of the improvements when it was
The
fully, when it was
2018
all
annual.
packaged
Yeah.
together. It did pass.
At the
Now it's
28
being split out.
Oh, both projects were in one article, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even though this was funded, it was was tied together.
Okay, so there's that. The short-term rental tax. There was some additional discussion with the Department of Revenue reps over the weekend, and Brian, I think, needs to let you know about a serious concern that has arisen based on the implementation, based on the timing and the contracts that may have already been approved that are not subject to the tax.
So over the weekend, we reached out to DOR. Well, we were at MMA, and I actually had a very lengthy conversation with Tony Rashis, who's the Deputy Director of Accounts for DOR. DOR hasn't officially released how they're going to view the potential revenue that could be generated from this, but the indication is that they more than likely will continue down the same path that they have taken with other sources of revenue. One example being the marijuana tax and local option payments, where until they have a history to be able to see that what it is, they're more than likely not going to allow communities to count it in their when they're setting the tax rate. Now, ordinarily, this wouldn't be a problem for us. The only reason that we really talked to them about this was to really get an understanding about what would happen if we were to move from 6% to 4% in the tax. And because typically during the tax rate setting process with local option tax receipts, you can budget up to the amount that you received in the prior year. And for just as a point of reference, in 2018, we received $3.6 million in rooms tax under the local option 6%. So in the discussion, moving from 6 to 4 would be an actual 33% decline in revenue. And if DOR releases a guidance that says that we can't use this to count on during the local budgeting process for the recap sheet, there's a very real possibility DOR won't commit to this right now because they haven't released this, but there's a very real possibility that we're not going to be able to budget up to the amount that we would have received in fiscal 19 going into fiscal 20. And because DOR would know if we made a 6 to 4% change, it stands to reason that they may actually make us reduce the amount on the recap, which could put us into a scenario where we would have a deficit that we would have to somehow try to raise. One of the other things that we looked at when we were doing this is, when we were doing all the projections, we never took into account any of the amount of rentals that may have been signed before 1/1. I reached out to one individual in the real estate community who estimates that could be about 30% of the rentals that would be done on this fiscal year starting on July 1st of 2019 could be impacted by not having to pay the tax in the first fiscal year. So I don't know how we want to proceed, but DOR is pretty clear that if we do implement this change, we're going to have some very serious discussions with them as we move forward in terms of how to potentially solve an issue. We potentially could make an argument based on receipts in September, which would be for June, July, and August. So we'd have 2 months of history that might help us, but I'm not entirely sure that they're going to grant us all of the local option revenue for rooms if we reduce it to 4% based on 19's collections.
Did you ask that question? And they said they. I mean, so it sounds like they're not. We know they don't give us credit on the upside, but they may take it away.
They may take it away. They're not going to commit to anything until they release it. And they're admittedly, I think, they're working on it, and they're working.
So we don't have any knowledge that they're going to take it away.
I have no definitive knowledge that
Okay.
they will, but the likelihood that they would let us do it is probably less than not very good in by the tone of the conversation. Without coming out and saying it, he led to the path that this may not be the best course of action until you have until you have the revenue collections under the expanded room occupancy tax under your belt to be able to prove what you're actually going to be receiving.
So, but then the legislature and the governor passed this law that gave towns that ability. So he would have. So I think we should take some direction from the fact that that's how this bill was written and passed and signed into law to give us that option.
Brian and I talked about this before the meeting a little bit, and one potential compromise that I thought of for the article that we've proposed to be able to reduce it to 4 was that could go into effect on July 1, 2020. So the people who booked after January 1 for this year will be subject to the 6% tax, but then they would know that it was coming, that the provision was being made for the following. Because there are some, fairly big what ifs, and with the small gap we have from our levy limit, I don't want to impact the general fund. So that was just one suggestion that I had thought of.
Brian, what do you think about that suggestion? Do you feel safer doing that, or is it?
I mean, if the motion can be worded and we can delay implementation, then I would feel comfortable with that, because it would start on July 1st of 2020, and we'd have a year's worth of data to actually understand what the impact was and what the implication of that change was. And I mean, a lot of this will gain a lot more clarity realistically in the first rooms and meals tax payment, which would be in September, because we would have July and August. So we would have some clarity on what this is, because for us, the first 2 payments for the local option are the largest, because they encompass between July and November. So they're the largest payments. As you saw tonight, we received over $3.6 million in those 2 payments. So I think that option, if we can delay that implementation by the vote, would certainly be something that would give us the ability to truly understand what the implication is.
Can we? Well, the first off, it's typical government. It drives me crazy. So the people who snuck in before January 1, don't pay it at all, and then everyone else gets stuck with the largest bill possible. And that to me doesn't.
Well, they would start paying it on July for the next year, but that's,
no, I understand,
yeah,
but I don't like it. It's just typical. But it's and not being clear on it is just typical to me. But the other thing is we don't even have to bring it. Rather than if we strike it, then we were at 6% anyway, and we deal with it next year. I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth on it, and I thought what we were doing was a reasonable course of action with all the unknowns that were going to happen. That were going to impact sort of the homeowners and impact the industry. I thought that, and my guesstimates, so we were going to be all right, but I don't know.
Well, we'll have some clarity on that 2.75 too, which is just continues to be the wild card in this. But I think I'm very concerned with rescinding the vote that we took last week, when it was an agenda item, and it's not really
Right.
an agenda item tonight.
Well, I mean, it was under the exact same agenda item. There was the subtext to it. A quick question before you get to Jim: is there a chance that if there is a special town meeting and it's in October, does that give us enough information, or do you really need to get past November for the second payment?
Wouldn't go in effect till the next quarter anyway, right?
Right. Are you talking about whether we would be able to argue to not have to reduce it on the recap sheet? Is that what you're asking? If we had a special town meeting, or would
If
that
we
be?
delayed it, would it be next annual town meeting or special? Or it
I
doesn't
think
even
if we
matter.
had a special, I don't think it would go in effect until the next quarter, if I understood the legislation correctly. And
So it's the same either way.
So it's more than likely going to be the same. I mean, we don't forget the reality is that even a special town meeting impacts the tax rate setting process for the fiscal year whenever we implement that. So.
So I sat in the back of the room when the same conference you were at with on municipal finance, and there was a lot of discussion on this topic. It probably took up about almost half of the conversation on municipal finance.
It did.
And they don't have their act together. They don't know what they have. They don't have a lot of direction. There were a lot of questions people asked, and this is only really the Cape and the islands. This isn't a Commonwealth-wide issue.
True.
But it was certainly a heated conversation, both during that meeting and before and afterwards. So, we have town meetings not till April. I say we go forward with the board vote we've had, and if we need to, amend it on the floor or withdraw it, then I think that's something we can do at town meeting. But I personally wouldn't be in favor of making any changes now.
But here's the tricky part. If we bring something to town meeting, it can be amended and people can say they don't want to do it at all, and pack the house. Depending what night it's on, then we could end up in something that the unforeseen consequence of bringing it could be even worse.
Well, true.
It is, but I'm saying, I'm just saying, I don't know.
I would say this: the unforeseen consequence, if it was amended in using your example, Matt, that people don't want to do it at all, that would create a $3.6 million hole in the budget because they would not let me budget one single penny in the tax rate recap setting process. So there is a potential unforeseen consequence, but I'm just trying to present what DOR had indicated to us in the conversations that we've had with them about this. And it is the thing that they're trying to wrestle with on how to properly do this. So,
Can I know this is very confusing, but when you say not do it at all, I'm not sure what you mean. And I don't know if maybe what you meant, Matt, was not do it at all means we don't go to 4.
Well,
We stayed
well,
6?
I'm saying no. I'm saying if we don't bring it to town meeting, by not doing it all, I mean if we don't bring it to town meeting, then we don't chance an amendment to bring it to 2 or to bring it to 0. As soon as we bring it, we've opened up potential of a $3.6 million hole in the budget.
Well, yeah, but the article, your vote last week was to go specifically from 6 to 4. And I think what we heard from town council was any other number would be potentially ruled outside the scope.
Yeah, but it has if it's ruled outside the scope by the moderator.
Right.
If it isn't, if you're going higher, usually what happens is she says you can't go higher. People didn't hear it.
Yeah.
But usually when you go lower, it's usually okay.
So there would have to be a ruling on that. Yes.
We'd have to be clear on that if we're going to bring it, because I think we could be putting ourselves in a serious situation anyway.
I just want to say I thought that the way we are approaching it and having this on the warrant is bad business anyways, and this just feels like that reinforces it, and we're taking a needless risk. I think it's irresponsible, to be honest, and I think it's bad business all around. I think we can take a year to see how it pans out, get the answers we need from the DOR, and then make the reductions. So
I agree with what Rita said. The only thing that you guys have brought up, it was on the agenda. We already had this discussion. If we take it off, is that fair?
I think we rushed to the vote last week. Brian did warn us of this, and we decided to vote on it anyways. And again, I think it's new information. We still don't have the complete information. I don't know that there needs to be action tonight or that there should be, but I think we should consider it because again, this is new information, and it feels again we're taking a needless risk at this stage. So if it came up later on, I think we should consider it with the new information that we have, and we should have waited for this information anyways.
But this is the last night.
Oh, this is
Correct,
the last
Libby?
night.
Well, I think we need to put off a vote on adopting the warrant if you're going to make any changes
Yeah, that's what I sort of.
in regard to what we did last week.
we have
Because
another
this
week?
has already been, this information about what we decided last week has
Yeah,
been
I mean,
put
this-
out there significantly.
I mean, it's been-
And it would be very unfair to the community. And it's also a little bit hard that the two people arguing hardest for it are the people who voted against it last week. So I think it does need to come from the three people who voted for it.
Yeah, and I agree. Those are my comments. I'm not requesting that there be any action taken, but no, I'm making my comments, and I realize the position that I'm in as someone who opposed it anyways, even without this information. But I think it would be wise to consider if that's possible, and if not, we've made the decision, and I think it was irresponsible.
The timing is such that it is tight to do it next week, but it can be done. The warrant won't be getting to FinCom as quickly. It's a week delayed. It's just a bit tight, that's all. But it's legal.
Right. Well, if we were to move it to next week, what are we doing?
Are we gonna have any new information for Brian by next week? Can we get a clarification?
I could call them tomorrow and find out when they are going to release it. I know he did indicate today that they're working very diligently and sitting down and talking about what they want to do and how they want to handle it, because they know that many communities such as Nantucket are in the middle of budget season and need the clarity on how to manage through this. So I can certainly ask them. I can tell you, if they come out with this, in my mind, if they come out with the same consistent conservative approach that they've taken, then it does potentially put us in some risk that they may end up saying that we have to reduce that by some amount. What it would look like, I can't tell you today, and I don't want to try to predict it.
Right.
But they were very clear that would have to be, if the vote was to reduce it, we would have to begin discussions very soon with them afterwards on how we were going to manage this and how we come up with the projections that we would be able to satisfy. And just to point out, I mean, the risk is that we can't set a tax rate and that gets delayed. And that's certainly not something that I would want to do and delay past the first quarter or the third quarter of the fiscal year. Because then you essentially are sending the actual tax bill in the last quarter of the year, which is not ideal to all the homeowners on the island. So I will certainly reach out to them if that's the select board's desire, and see if I can get better clarity on when they're going to come out with their informational guideline on how they're going to allow communities to handle it.
I just think we need to give public notice before we take a vote.
I agree. Yeah. So, if Libby, you think we can sneak in one more week and FinCom will be okay with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll add that to next week's agenda to finalize. So there's a couple of other things. In discussions with the chief, we modified the noise bylaw a little bit to try to make it a little clearer as to what the true intent is. So in the warrant, Greg, I don't know what page in the packet is, but it's page 42 in the warrant document. I just wanted to show you what changed. Okay, yeah. So the red text is what we put in since last week, to just clarify that we're really talking about power tools and the times. And there was a seasonal restriction that wasn't clear last week. We didn't think.
Mr. Chairman, what happened last week in the discussion, I was listening to you guys as you were talking about what you thought this bylaw said, and each of these three things stand independently in the bylaw. You know, down below it says domestic power tools, but that's not the same as the construction and everything. And so what I gathered from your discussion last week, you were talking about not just all construction noise. For instance, somebody stacking lumber would be prohibited by the old language in section C there. Power tools is what you were trying to get at. If I'm wrong, just leave it the way it was. But the other thing that was missing was the seasonal adjustment in the summer for June, July, and September, where what was proposed would be a 7 a.m. Up to 7 a.m., where right now we have a seasonal adjustment June, July, and September to 7:30 a.m. And just my feeling is we ought to stay consistent between that and the other noise things that are prohibited, so that it's one time for everything, not this for that and this for another.
I'm happy with the way it's written, but the only thing that was actually my original thought was that the evening time would be seasonal as well. That it would be 8 to 7:30 in the between June 15th and September 15th. That it would not apply in the winter time.
Oh, okay. So in the winter time, it would be from 8 p.m. till 7.
No, in the winter time it would remain the
From
10
to 7.
That it would just be when things are so densely filled and windows are open. And
So in C, section C, you want 8 to say 10?
And then in the parentheses, 7:30 to 8 between September.
Yep.
I mean, June and September.
8 to 7:30.
Or,
Yes. Yeah. I know.
Well, okay, so between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., and then in parentheses,
8 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. between June 15th and September 15th of each year.
okay, same thing under E. It already says 10 there. 8 p.m. to 7:30 a.m.
Well, I think that was that it wasn't going to apply to domestic.
No, domestic power tools are, though the way that's written is if C applies to only projects that have a building permit. E applies to if you're going to put up a shelf in your house and you need to drill a hole through it, you can't do that outdoors under E during those time frames. Or you can't run your lawnmower, you can't run your leaf blower, you can't do any of that other
I know the
stuff like
intention
that.
was more for heavy construction.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how you define heavy construction, but
It seems like the permitting.
It's the top.
Yeah, I think it works. And E is basically usually like a homeowner, a property owner, if you're doing some DIY outside. It's
Right.
fine, correct?
So do we really need E then?
Was that not already there? That's been added?
no, that's something that's been suggested to be added.
But that still says 10 to 7.
Yeah, I don't know why he did that, but that would be.
Is that switched to 7:30 in the summer?
7:30? Yep, 7:30 a.m.
But that's new language.
That I added.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't know why he did that different for the other one.
Who's he?
The person that wrote it, whoever wrote it. The first I saw it was last week when you guys had it up here. So
So,
It-
doesn't
it
sound
had
like
been
this is ready for
circulating
prime
around.
time.
Yeah.
I think we need bring it back next week. I don't know. It's hard for us to write something during the meeting.
Okay, so Dawn, can you be my liaison and fix this, please?
We'll fix it before next week.
Okay, there's a new article pertaining to Noshop sewer system acquisitions that is very late in coming, but basically, we have a couple of lingering situations, and this has arisen because of the Richmond development. They're going to be using the Noshop pump station, and a concern arose in Noshop that they actually own their sewer lines, and what sewer department has been trying to do is get through the sort of inventory of all privately owned sewers and go through the process of actually taking them over as town lines, because really they all ought to be town lines as best we can, because they're impacting our system if they're not. So there's been, town council has spoken with the Noshop attorney, and I think there's been some agreement that we will go through if you recall the sewer dedication agreement that we did with Richmond. That's sort of where this most recently came up. They're agreeable with that. However, there may be some easements that are necessary for the town to convey for the purposes of other connections in, and that would be the reason for the warrant article. So it's sort of administrative, really, in nature.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, doesn't it?
No, well, will we inspect, this is, I guess, David, will we inspect to make sure we're taking, that they're up to snuff before we take them? 'Cause that's kind of, and I'm thinking about roads. Often people don't they don't pay and take care of the roads, and then we get stuck with the big bill for the end.
I agree 100%. And now we do have the ability to do that, to inspect these lines. This one, we do have a lot of the original construction information and plans and stuff. And that one has been in really good shape. It's just that some of these are starting to show up now that, out of the blue, that we've been surprised by recently. So, but this one actually also has a couple of offshoots into the backside of Pine Tree and all that other stuff. So there's some little bit of complications as far as some of the easements they've already granted, but it's come down now to this article to get us where we got to go.
Right, but you're happy that it's large enough and it's in good shape.
It's
And we're
large
not-
enough and it's
we're
good
not taking
shape.
on another huge liability.
No, and we've actually been in there before and had to respond on calls. So we've actually been in there to do some maintenance on it. Other than that, there's still a couple other subdivisions that have had zero maintenance on them. So.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, and then the numbering just has to get done. That's more of a note to myself. So next week, we need to fix up this noise bylaw and get a final determination on the short-term rental. Okay.
I wanted to just bring up, I wanted to bring up the Historical Commission, and I know that they haven't met in a couple of years, and they've been kind of dysfunctional for a couple of years. There's probably many reasons why. But I asked a couple of people, sort of HCC type and people involved, and they didn't even know what they did, so I sort of looked around. And they're established by a vote of the town or the city government. A local historic commission is a municipal agency responsible for ensuring that preservation concerns are considered in community planning and development decisions. Over 340 LHCs across Mass are already established and working closely with the MHC. They serve as local preservation advocates and as an important resource for information about the community's cultural resources and preservation activities. So I'm kind of a little concerned that we voted something and that we've had it in place. Is that a good thing to have or not? Would that voice be helpful on, some of the issues we're dealing with? Because the HCC is busy enough. I just, so I'm not sure. So I don't support getting rid of it. I think we should be trying to get, a meaningful committee at some point, and giving them, and allowing them to do what they're supposed to do. There's resources with Mass Historical. They do surveying in some communities. There's a lot of work that they do if you go on the website. So anyway.
I guess I would just say they've been giving, there's no reason why they couldn't do those things.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
I know. And so, but just because we have a, you know, and I think, you know, I could probably make up 10 reasons why they haven't, but, you know, just because they haven't doesn't mean that we won't at some point get a good group in to do it, you know, and that would do that. So, anyway.
You want to take it off, or you just want?
Yeah, I'm asking to take it off. I don't think we should, you know, because then what are we going to bring it back when, you know, when, I just think preservation is, you know, is key to our economy. It's key to the island. It's something that we should be proud of and that we're counting on, not, you know, not undermining. So,
Is there any advantage of taking it to town meeting and people saying, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, we forgot about this. We're going to vote it down and then get involved? Can you almost use it as a marketing tool? Is there any advantage to that?
yeah, if we pull it and don't allow the vote, maybe, but I don't know.
Phil?
Unless I'm badly confused, I was on this committee a number of years ago. And one thing is, it's required by the state, or it's specified by the state. It's state legislature provides for it. And the other thing is, the reason I left was because I felt that most of the folks on it were frustrated because they couldn't be on the HDC. And it was just confusing. If you take the statewide characteristics of their constitution and look at it, I think you can find a perfectly adequate committee to make up.
Thank you, Phil.
Do we have in many of our other committees, when there's resignations, people often give a little reasoning as to why? I don't know if that's something that we have. No one ever ran.
Right, it's been empty for 2 years. I mean, so I see why it's on. Just clean it up. I think keeping it will maybe rejuvenate it, Matt. Or people say they don't want it. You want to make a motion, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'll motion that we remove it.
Okay. For a second.
From it.
I'd second.
So, the question: remove it from being removed?
Yes, remove it from being removed.
Okay,
Yes.
so not do it. Take no action.
Take no action.
Okay.
And then try to re-energize it. Try to get, you know, give it a charge and try to, you know, get people to do it again.
I wonder if seeing it on town meeting, though, would give people the call to action.
So I'm fine with what Matt said. But
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
So it's coming off the warrant?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it would have brought life to it, maybe regenerated. That's why I wanted it to go. And then if people really didn't want it, right? Maybe nobody cared.
Yeah, but at this point, who's gonna advocate? If we did that, who would advocate for it? Who would speak, you know?
I don't know.
I mean, it's sort of, anyway.
Yeah. Anything else, Libby, on the warrant?
No, I just was looking at my calendar. We're going to have to change the FinCom public hearing by a week or so, and just FYI.
Well, we all went to, for committee reports, we all went to the Mass Municipal Association. Not Matt, but 4 of us went. And Brian Turbot and Libby, and because it was a long
And
meeting.
Greg.
And Greg, sorry. And town councils were there, and we have a lot to say. We learned a lot. We want to explain that to the public and review it, but because it's such a long meeting, we're going to put it as an agenda item for next week.
Great.
So
Thank you.
everybody can go home. Any other comments before we adjourn?
No. Motion to adjourn?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
I got him right here, Greg. Take it.